Chapter 465. Clack. Footsteps echoed through the gloomy prison. While the eagle was auctioning off the spirit vein and stirring up a frenzy, Wang Chong had a visitor. His clothes were as white as snow, his expression cold, and he wore the insignia of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. It was an old acquaintance of Wang Chong's. "Wang Chong, just what are you doing?" Zheng Qinzhou slowly walked up to the bars. Through the bars, he gazed at the cross-legged figure of Wang Chong. "Lord Zheng, are you not going to help the who suppress the Han?" Wang Chong did not even raise his head, his voice unperturbed. Hearing Wang Chong's mocking voice, Zheng Qinzhou's face flushed with anger. "Wang Chong, don't get too pleased. Do you think you can still leave? The Wang clan is powerful, but it can't control our Chamberlain of Dependencies. I never said that the Wang clan could interfere here. Wasn't that what you said?" Wang Chong indifferently said. "You." Zheng Qinzhou angrily snorted and fiercely swung his sleeve. "Wang Chong, you're the one who delivered this chance to me. In broad daylight, you actually dared to kill someone in the capital. Does your Wang clan still have any laws?" Wang Chong's eyes flashed, and for the first time, he did not immediately retort. "There are some things that must be done. You don't understand, and I don't blame you. In the future, you will understand just what you said today. A life for a life. A country has its laws and a clan has its rules. If the Son of Heaven breaks the law, he will be punished the same way as the common people. Let me tell you, Wang Chong, no matter how powerful your Wang clan is, I will make sure you go through prison," Zheng Qinzhou harshly said. In the entire capital, Wang Chong was at the top of the blacklist of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. If there was one person in the capital that the Chamberlain of Dependencies hated to the bone, it was undoubtedly Wang Chong. However, Wang Chong was no ordinary scion of an aristocratic family, nor was he so rash. Thus, even after so long, the Chamberlain of Dependencies had been unable to do anything to him. If he didn't seize the opportunity this time, then it would be very difficult to get him in the future. Wang Chong was silent. It was rare that he didn't continue. "I do hope that your wish will come true. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that you won't be able to restrain me," Wang Chong said indifferently, and his voice revealed a trace of sadness. "Humph. Wang Chong, don't think that we don't know what you've done outside. Let me tell you, even if your Wang clan sells the spirit vein, no matter how much money you get, it's still useless." Zheng Qinzhou sneered. "So, everything is for this?" Wang Chong suddenly raised his head and sneered, his eyes blazing like torches. Zheng Qinzhou's expression froze, and he was momentarily speechless. I don't know what you're talking about," Zheng Qinzhou coldly said, but his gaze subconsciously shifted to the side, not daring to meet Wang Chong's gaze. When did the buying and selling of the capital become so important to the Chamberlain of Dependencies? What, the eagle must have sold a lot of spirit veins, right? Even the Chamberlain of Dependencies can't sit still. Did he send you to test me? Wang Chong grinned. Although he was smirking, Wang Chong's eyes were sharp and profound, seeming to pierce through one's heart. Although Zheng Qinzhou was much older than Wang Chong, in front of this teenager, he was still embarrassed. It was like he was naked and had no secrets, making him feel very uncomfortable. The fact that the eagle was selling spirit veins in the capital naturally could not be hidden from the Chamberlain of Dependencies. Given the amount of trouble Wang Chong had caused and the degree of threat he posed to the Chamberlain of Dependencies, how could the Chamberlain of Dependencies not guard against him and pay attention to him? It could be said that no strange move by Wang Chong could be hidden from the Chamberlain of Dependencies. Given the status and influence of the Chamberlain of Dependencies, it had never treated a teenager with such importance. However, when considering the trouble Wang Chong had caused for the Chamberlain of Dependencies, whether it was the regional commander's incident, the Prince Ozan incident, or this time, no one in the Chamberlain of Dependencies, including Zheng Qinzhou, felt that this was a minor matter. He was only a teenager, but he had already stirred up so much trouble. If he got a little older, it would be even worse. If they did not think of a way to deal with Wang Chong, lock him in prison, and resolve this problem, who knew how much trouble he would cause in the future? Wang Chong, don't get too cocky. The Court of Judicial Review and the Chamberlain of Dependencies are about to come to an agreement. When that time comes, I want to see how you'll be able to laugh. Zheng Qinzhou fiercely flung his sleeves, angrily storming away. The Court of Judicial Review and the Chamberlain of Dependencies, Wang Chong stared at Zheng Qinzhou's back in a daze. After a long while, he gave a long sigh. No matter how the Court of Judicial Review and the Chamberlain of Dependencies planned to deal with him, it was no longer important. Because a massive storm was about to sweep through the empire. Boom! The news from the southwest came much faster than Wang Chong had imagined. On the second day after Zheng Qinzhou left his prison, a piece of news shook the empire. In the southwest, the king of the Mengshi Zhao Empire, Jelifeng, had personally attacked Taish city on the southwest border. Jianghe governor Zhang Qiantua had committed suicide, and the entire city had been almost completely destroyed. And this had happened more than half a month ago. Jelifeng had sealed off the news, so not even the nearby Annan Protectorate headquarters knew of it. Only when Mengshi Zhao's army had completely withdrawn did the traveling merchants discover this tragedy. The entire empire was shaken by this news. Everyone in the imperial court was so shocked that they couldn't speak. Bang! A palm slammed heavily on the table, causing the palm to turn red, and the table was almost cracked. Bastard! Has Jelifeng gone mad? How dare he attack a city of the Tang dynasty? The person who said this was not someone from the Ministry of War, but an imperial censor of the court. Zhang Fei's hair and beard stood on end, his face bristling with rage. Absurd! What has the Annan Protectorate headquarters been doing? The imperial court hasn't lacked silver or grain for so many years, but they were told to do something like this? In the entirety of the southwest, at such a close distance, they didn't even know that a city had been breached. Is Jelifeng rebelling? The Tang dynasty has treated him well, but he dares to bite the hand that fed him and attack the Tang dynasty. Immediately send out the army and exterminate Jelifeng. Mengshi Zhao's people are too impudent. Whether civil or military officials, the Bureau of Revenue, the Bureau of Personnel, or even a few offices that normally had nothing to do with the military, all of them were enraged by Jelifeng. Some of the officials from the Bureau of Military Personnel had even petitioned the imperial court. Victory and defeat are commonplace for a soldier. The Tang dynasty had been founded nearly 300 years ago, surrounded by great powers. This sort of war was not unheard of in the past. The Annong Protectorate, the Anxi Protectorate, Longxi, Baiting, it had happened in all of them. But the nature of this incident was completely different. Although it had happened before, it had never reached this scale. And there had never been a situation where an existence on Jelifeng's level had personally attacked the borders of the Tang dynasty. The southwest border had been peaceful for several decades, and the Tang dynasty and Mengshi Zhao had always been at peace. And unlike the other powers around it, the Tang dynasty had provided Mengshi Zhao with much assistance. The writing, language, culture, and court of the two countries were identical. If the Tang dynasty was the teacher, then Mengshi Zhao was the student. But this time, the student had disobeyed the teacher and breached a city of the Tang dynasty, even causing the death of a Tang dynasty governor. Chapter 466. But the true blow came from the common people. The southwest bordered Mengshi Zhao and Uzan, two foreign empires. It had the Tea-Horse Road, a place rich in profits. There were many people in the capital who did business there. When the matter of the southwest reached the capital, the mountain of corpses and sea of blood was not something that could be described in a single letter from the imperial court. Zhao was furious, so he didn't hold back at all. One could easily imagine the wretched state of the city. War! War! Mobilize the army and exterminate Mengshi Zhao. What is the imperial court doing? The Uzun are already attacking our Tang dynasty, so why hasn't the imperial court done anything? Exterminate them and teach them a harsh lesson. A debt of blood must be paid in blood. We must avenge the dead Han. Everyone was furious. The Tang dynasty had been peaceful for several decades. It had been able to rely on its army of several 100,000 to subdue the massive armies of the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, Goguryeo, Uzun, and Mengshi Zhao, and even the Abbasid Caliphate and Karak Spazinu of the far west. This was all because of its indisputable strength. In all these years, this indisputable strength had deeply honored the people of the Tang dynasty. And the war in the southwest had unquestionably made all the people feel a deep humiliation and offense. And when this humiliation and offense transformed into rage, the first to bear the brunt of it was the Annan Protectorate in the southwest. And Zhangqiu Jianqiong, as the previous Annan Protector General, was under even greater pressure. Bastard thing! Just what is Xianyu Zhongtong doing? I gave him the Annan Protectorate, but he actually made such a huge mistake for me. In the Minister of War's residence, Zhangqiu Jianqiong slammed his palm on the table, his face red with anger. The southwest was his territory, and he had presided over the border for several decades, never making a single mistake. Be it Mengshi Zhao or Uzun, they never dared to act rashly. They were not called the Tiger of the Empire for nothing. It was just that Zhangqiu Jianqiong could never have imagined that before he could even stabilize his position as the Minister of War and familiarize himself with the inner workings of the military, something like this would happen in his garrison at the southwestern border. What made it even more difficult for Zhangqiu Jianqiong to accept was that despite being so close to Jelifeng, Xianyu Zhongtong hadn't received any news at all. It was not until Jelifeng had retreated that Xianyu Zhongtong sent a message to ask him what he should do. Everyone in the capital was criticizing the royal court, and the royal court was shifting this pressure onto him. Zhangqiu Jianqiong felt like he was sitting on a bed of needles. During this period of time, the number of civil and military officials who came to visit him almost broke his doorstep. Even though none of them said it outright, they were all criticizing the previous Southern Protector General. There were even a few imperial censors who came to accuse him of being responsible. This placed an enormous pressure on Zhangqiu Jianqiong. He could ignore the other civil and military officials, but no one could ignore the imperial censors of the court. In the records of the Tang dynasty, many of the important officials of the court had been criticized by the imperial censors. If he made a single mistake, he might lose his position as Minister of War before he could even warm it. But even though his heart was filled with rage, Zhangqiu Jianqiong was also deeply puzzled. Jelifeng, oh, Jelifeng, just what are you trying to do? You should know the consequences of recklessly attacking the Tang dynasty. This was not as simple as a dispute. Just what else has happened in the southwest that I don't know about? Zhangqiu Jianqiong muttered to himself, his mind spinning. As a great general, one's most basic ability was to remain calm. Although Zhangqiu Jianqiong was furious, he would not be so easily dominated by anger. After presiding over the southwest for so many years, Zhangqiu Jianqiong knew every blade of grass and tree like the back of his hand. Although Zheluofeng had been eyeing them like a tiger watching its prey and had always been filled with rebellious intent, he wasn't an impulsive, brainless existence. Zhangqiu Jianqiong would never believe that Jelifeng had mobilized such a large force just to break into a city and then retreat with nothing to show for it. This was not Jelifeng's personality. Zhangqiu Jianqiong was sure that something had happened here that he did not know about. But the southwest was very far from the capital, and a round trip would take at least 10 some days. But he couldn't wait that long. It really was Chonger's guess. In his massive estate, Wang Zhen sat on a wooden armchair, a worried look on his face as he gripped the letter in his hand. He had probably known about the southwest much earlier than anyone else, but Wang Zhen had never believed it. It wasn't that he didn't believe in Wang Chong, but an important matter of state couldn't be decided so easily based on the words of an outsider, a spy. An important weapon of the state couldn't be treated so lightly. "Milord, it's time for morning court." A maid suddenly walked in and respectfully reminded him. "I know." Wang Zhen nodded, put on his last pair of boots, and left the estate. This was the first morning court session since the news of the southwest had spread. Dressed in court robes, Wang Zhen was stunned the moment he stepped into Taiji Palace. The hall was packed with people. In the past, Wang Zhen would only see a handful of people when he arrived. There would occasionally be a few more, but not too many. But this time, almost everyone had arrived much earlier than usual. They were all whispering to each other, excitedly discussing something. Not even Wang Zhen noticed. The mood was completely different from usual. His Majesty has arrived. A few moments later, with the crack of a whip, hundreds of officials lined up, beaded curtains lowered, and an imposing figure descended. The morning court session had finally begun. The Holy Emperor has decreed that if there is a memorial, the court session will end if there is no memorial. In front of the sacred steps, a young eunuch with grizzled temples stepped forward and shouted in a shrill voice. "Your Majesty, this subject has a memorial." An old civil official over 50 years of age immediately stepped forward. This was a routine meeting of the imperial court. Grain taxes, irrigation, the livelihood of the people, there were far too many things to discuss in every court session. The Bureau of Works, the Bureau of Agriculture, the Bureau of Revenue, the Bureau of Personnel, one by one, they all took turns. Wang Zhen's eyes were closed, his body motionless. He was already extremely familiar with these procedures. "Your Majesty, this subject has a memorial. The king of the southwest Mengshi Zhao Empire, Jelifeng, has disrespected the Tang dynasty and led an army to attack the Tang dynasty, destroying its cities and leaving mountains of corpses and seas of blood in its wake. Your Majesty, please make a decision." It was finally the Bureau of Military Personnel's turn. Before Zhangqiu Jianqiong could speak, a fifth-rank general suddenly stepped forward, bowed, and loudly declared. "Buzz!" Zhangqiu Jianqiong's face twisted into a purple hue as he turned to look. In the entire hall, the originally trivial atmosphere suddenly changed and became extremely stagnant. "It's here." At almost the same time, Wang Zhen opened his eyes. The previous court session was only the foreplay. The real highlight was the war in the southwest. "Your Majesty, Jelifeng has offended the Tang dynasty. We cannot let them off so easily. They must be taught a lesson for being so ungrateful. This subject suggests that we immediately attack Mengshi Zhao and make them pay the price." Another general spoke up, his voice impassioned. Wang Zhen recognized Wu Zhengpeng of the Bureau of Military Personnel, a fourth-rank general. He was an old general in the Bureau of Military Personnel and did not belong to any faction. Both the King of Song and King Qi had tried to rope him in, but they had both failed. He was a staunch supporter of the war. In the Bureau of Military Personnel, there were many others like Wu Zhengpeng who were loyal to the royal family and did not belong to any faction. "Your Majesty, this subject agrees. May the Holy Emperor dispatch troops to punish Mengshi Zhao. Let Jelifeng understand the relationship between a ruler and a subject. This subject agrees. This subject agrees. This subject agrees." In the hall, all the pro-war officials stepped forward to express their support. "This subject objects." Just when the crowd was in an uproar, a resounding voice suddenly resounded. A white-bearded civil official with an extraordinary demeanor and the air of a Confucian scholar glared angrily at the crowd. "The military is a major affair of the state. It cannot be ignored. Mengshi Zhao and the Tang dynasty have always been at peace. Why would Jelifeng suddenly lead troops to attack the Tang dynasty? There must be something fishy about this. Does Lord Feng mean to say that what happened on the southwest border is fake? So many civilians and Governor Zhang Qiantua died in battle. Did they die in vain?" A general immediately glared at him. "Lord Li did not say that. All of you keep talking about war. Do you know how many people die in a single war? So many people have already died. Do you want even more to die? This is a major affair of the state, we cannot act so rashly." Another official stepped forward and bluntly retorted. If there were pro-war factions, there would be pro-peace factions. This had been the case in every dynasty, and it was the same in this one. Rashly? You civil officials actually call this rashly? If Meng Shizhao does not learn his lesson, he will become even worse. If they become even bolder in the future and more people die at the border, are you going to take responsibility? The generals of the pro-war faction who were rebuked flushed with anger. The atmosphere in the hall became tense in a short period of time. The civil officials and the military officials, the pro-war faction and the pro-peace faction, had always been at odds with each other, but this time was especially different. Soon, the controversy became an argument, and the argument became a quarrel. In the end, everyone joined in, and the entire hall was in chaos. Lord Wang. Lord Wang. Just as Wang Zhen was deep in thought, a voice suddenly reached his ears, followed by several other voices. Ah! Wang Zhen's expression froze for a moment before he regained his composure. It was also at this moment that Wang Zhen realized that the debate in the hall had stopped. Everyone looked at him with a strange gaze. Lord Wang. What does Lord Wang think of Meng Shizhao's attack on the Tang dynasty this time? A voice with a strange expression came from his ear. Wang Zhen was dazed for a moment before he finally understood why everyone was looking at him like this. The Wang clan had always been on the same side as King Qi, so there was no question that the Wang clan belonged to the pro-war faction. Chapter 467. If it had been the Wang Zhen of the past, there would have been no doubt that he would have stood up for this matter. This was because the Tang dynasty had enough strength to deal with any side, whether it was Meng Shizhao, Uzan, the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, Goguryeo, or Arabia. Without this strength, the Tang dynasty would never have reached its current level of power. This was a point that every person of the Great Tang firmly believed. But this time, Wang Zhen was silent. Wang Zhen's mind was filled with the words Wang Chong had sent to him through the eagle. No matter what happens, Big Uncle should not lightly express his opinion. These words had been spoken several days ago, and Wang Chong had apparently predicted something. Chonger, just what did you see? Just what is it about the imperial court that has you so worried about this matter? Wang Zhen's eyes were dazed, his mind in turmoil. Wang Chong's recent state had been far too strange, but no one dared to say that he had gone mad. At the very least, he had long ago learned of the news from the southwest, much faster than the imperial court had. It was hard to say whether this nephew of his had already predicted something. After experiencing so many things, Wang Zhen no longer dared to underestimate his nephew's opinion. Lord Wang. Lord Wang. A faintly discernible voice rang out. Everyone in the hall glanced at Wang Zhen in dismay. The Lord Wang of the past had always been astute, wise, decisive, but today, he had appeared to be in a daze twice, refusing to answer. The officials of the pro-war faction were even more perplexed by this. Wang Zhen and the King of Song were unswervingly pro-war. To be more precise, they were the standard-bearers of the pro-war faction in the court. Although Wang Zhen was a civil official, the Wang clan was undoubtedly a clan of ministers and generals, possessing enormous prestige in the court. In this sort of situation, Wang Zhen had no reason to hesitate. This matter, court dismissed. Before Wang Zhen could finish, a sharp voice came from the upper reaches of the hall. Bzzz. When, almost at the same time, an enormous pressure appeared in everyone's perception. Everyone was startled, and they hurriedly lowered their heads. However, before anyone could react, the huge pressure immediately disappeared from everyone's perception without a trace. Raising his head, he saw that the bead curtain above the main hall had moved, and that imposing figure had already disappeared. This is, what happened to His Majesty? Everyone felt a sense of loss. The Holy Emperor rarely left without listening to his minister's arguments. For a moment, no one could grasp His Majesty's intentions, and they were at a loss for what to do. Luckily, I managed to escape. On the other hand, Wang Zhen heaved a sigh of relief. His Majesty's attitude was unpredictable, but no matter what, at least he did not have to make his attitude clear. It's time to see Chong'er. Seeing the frowns on the faces of the warmongering ministers, Wang Zhen flung his sleeves and hurriedly left the hall. This morning's court meeting was very uncomfortable. He had to figure out as soon as possible why Wang Chong told him not to express any attitude. The pressure from the Court of Judicial Review and the Chamberlain of Dependencies was unimaginable. Although he knew that it would not be easy for his big uncle to enter, it would be several days before Wang Chong was able to meet his big uncle. In the hidden prison, the candles flickered. Wang Zhen was dressed in casual black clothes, his bearing calm and composed, but the worry on his brow could not be concealed. Big uncle. Upon seeing his big uncle, Wang Chong's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly stood up. After so many days, this was his first time seeing his big uncle. Chong'er. Wang Zhen nodded. As his gaze swept over Wang Chong's gaunt figure, a hint of heartache flitted across his brow. Of the descendants of the Wang clan, the one that Wang Zhen cared the most about was not his own son, nor was it Wang Chong's two brothers. Rather, it was this nephew that he had disliked the most in the past, Wang Chong. Seeing his haggard appearance, Wang Zhen found it very hard to bear. But he clenched his teeth and hardened his heart, quickly regaining his composure. The matter of Wang Chong killing a large number of Hu in Drunken Sparrow restaurant, attacking the Yuzhou soldiers, and killing Zhang Shogui's subordinates in front of him had caused far too much of a ruckus. Even biting Vice Protector General An Sishun had been dragged in. Although An Sishun was Vice Protector General, the Protector General of biting had always been an empty position. It had always been held by members of the royal family. In other words, An Sishun was already the most authoritative figure in biting. Although Wang Chong had stirred up trouble in the past, none of it had been as big as this. The old master had already sent word that no one was allowed to interfere in this matter. Wang Chong had done something wrong, so he had to be punished. If not for this, Wang Chong would not still be imprisoned in the Imperial Army, Chamberlain of Dependencies, and Court of Judicial Review. Relax. After a while, when this storm has passed, no matter what the old master says, I will think of a way to get you out. My words are useless in front of your grandfather. But the words of the King of Song won't go unheeded. In the end, Wang Chong was still his nephew, and he couldn't help but feel a little sorry for him. Big uncle, I know that you want to help me, but I've never been worried about that. Big uncle, I know that you want to help me, but that has never been what I'm worried about. Wang Chong shook his head, a surge of warmth surging through his heart. Everything had a price, and when he had decided to deal with an Yaoyuan, Wang Chong had already known what sort of price he would have to pay. Wang Chong had never regretted his decision. Wang Chong was now worried about something else. Big uncle, tell me, is the situation in the imperial court very bad? There's no need to hide it from me. I can guess. Wang Chong said, a hint of worry in his voice. In this period of time, he had been looking forward to news from his big uncle. The tragedy of his last life was repeating itself in this one. Wang Chong could smell the thick scent of a storm in the wind. Ha! Wang Chong sighed and nodded. Right now, the imperial court is full of voices calling for war. The voices coming from the imperial court and the people are too loud. Even many of the old officials who support peace can't withstand the pressure and have changed their stance. I can't last for much longer. Chong'er, you have to tell me, just why are you doing this? The clouds of war were thick over the capital, and in the few days that they had been preparing to meet with Wang Chong, countless officials had come knocking on the gates of the Wang residence to seek an audience with Wang Chong. All of them wanted Wang Chong to make his stance clear, but only Wang Chong himself knew just how much pressure he had been under in this period of time. Wang Chong had always doted on this nephew of his, but this was no trifling matter. Bang! Wang Chong had barely finished speaking when he heard a massive bang. Under Wang Chong's flabbergasted gaze, Wang Chong's eyes reddened as he suddenly bent his knees and kneeled in front of Wang Chong. Chong'er, what are you doing? Wang Chang's eyes went wide in shock. There was no doubt that Wang Chang's performance had completely surpassed his expectations. Big uncle, I know that you have many questions in your heart and that you are in a very difficult position. But only you can help me with this matter. Wang Chang's eyes were red and his expression was solemn as he heavily kneeled on the ground. From the memories of his last life, there was no question that this matter had already reached its most critical juncture. In his last life, the Wang clan had long since declined and was powerless to intervene in this war. But this time was different. If they wanted to avoid a repeat of the tragedy of his last life, they had to make a decision right now. They could not afford to make the slightest mistake. Chonger, just what are you planning? Looking at his kneeling nephew, Wang Zhen said grimly. His intuition, honed over several decades in the court, had allowed Wang Chong to sense that Wang Chong was plotting something. Big uncle, when the time comes for the final decision, no matter what, you must oppose this war with the King of Song. The war with Meng Shizhao cannot be carried out at this time. Wang Chong sternly said, his head deeply bowing. What? For the first time, shock appeared on Wang Zhen's face. Chonger, do you know what you're saying? Jiang'a City has been reduced to rubble, and many civilians have died. This was not a simple resolution. If our Wang clan opposes the attack at this time, we will be condemned by the entire world. Wang Zhen was truly stunned by Wang Chong's request. He had always believed that Wang Chong had kept him from expressing his stance because he had something important to tell him. But this was definitely not the case. Abstaining, remaining silent, and not expressing one's stance, these were two completely different concepts from opposing the war. Moreover, our Wang clan and the King of Song have always been the banner of the pro-war faction in the court, and everyone follows our lead. It is precisely because of this that we have been able to accumulate so many connections in the court. The Wang clan can remain silent, can abstain, but we cannot side with Jelifeng and oppose the war. If I do as you say, the prestige that the Wang clan has accumulated over the decades will vanish in a single day. No. I can't agree to this matter. Wang Zhen flung his sleeves and said without hesitation. He could have never imagined that this was what Wang Chong wanted him to do. If he were to do so, the Wang clan would lose the prestige that it had accumulated over the past generations, and when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. No one would listen to the Wang clan's orders or respond to its decisions. If he were to do so, the Wang clan's downfall would only be a matter of time. It wasn't without reason that many of the pro-peace faction were unable to hold on and change their stance. Big uncle, if we don't oppose the war, we might really be facing a calamity. Prostrating himself on the ground, Wang Chong said in agony. The Tang dynasty has existed for more than 300 years, and its collapse will probably happen today. In the vast divine continent, of the billions of people, only he and the Wang clan could have foreknowledge of this crisis and understand it. If even the Wang clan couldn't take the appropriate measures, what hope did the Central Plains have? Without a powerful Tang dynasty, when that calamity came, who in the world would be able to stop it? He had already failed back then, and if he were to start all over again in this life, would he fail again? Chonger, just what are you saying? Wang Zhen stood there in a daze, completely stunned by Wang Chang's words. Chapter 468. Big uncle, once the war begins, the Tang dynasty will lose without a doubt. Wang Chong knelt on the ground and cried out in pain. I want to stop this war not because I want to help Meng Shizhao, but because I'm worried about the Tang dynasty. 300,000 Meng Shizhao elites and 180,000 Tang dynasty Anan soldiers. Once this war begins, it will be a war of unprecedented proportions. Big uncle, have you ever thought about what will happen if the Tang dynasty loses? Wang Zhen was dumbfounded. As a civil official, he was not well versed in matters of military strategy. In this period of time, the court had been discussing how to punish the Meng Shizhao Empire and Jelifeng. No one had ever considered the question of the Tang dynasty's defeat, and no one had ever considered it from this angle. The Tang dynasty would not lose. This was a belief deeply rooted in everyone's hearts. But victory and defeat are commonplace for a soldier. Wang Zhen had to admit that once the war began, there would be victory and defeat. The Tang dynasty was completely likely to lose. Wang Zhen did not believe that the Tang dynasty would lose, but he was, after all, born into a clan of ministers and generals, so this was common sense. For a moment, Wang Zhen was stumped by Wang Chang's question. The dark prison was cold, and the gloomy light illuminated the even colder floor tiles. As Wang Chong knelt on the floor, he felt waves of cold air coming from his knees, but Wang Chang's heart was even colder than the floor. All he could hear was silence. There was nothing but the sound of breathing. But Wang Chong could clearly hear the beating of drums. That was the warning voice of fate in the dark. A world of billions of people, after going one round, had once more stepped into the abyss of destruction. Dawn was coming, and there would be the first glimmer of light. Autumn was coming, and there would be the first fallen leaf. The war in the southwest had never been a simple war. 180,000 elites had been wiped out, and the billions of people had been reduced to bones. For the first time in the Central Plains, the Tang dynasty had been completely defenseless against two foreign empires at its southwestern gate. This crushing defeat shocked the entire empire. It also shocked the boundless barbarians and jackals around the Tang dynasty. The death of 180,000 border elites caused the empire to suffer an unprecedented heavy blow. The entire military strength of the Tang dynasty suffered a huge loss of nearly a third. Such casualties were unprecedented in the history of the Tang dynasty. This war inspired all the great powers around the Tang dynasty, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, the Goguryeo Empire, the distant Abbasid Caliphate, Charax-Spazinu, and even Mengshi Zhao and the Uzun Empire that started this war. For the first time, the great powers around the Tang dynasty found that the Tang dynasty was not as powerful as they had imagined. It turned out that the current Tang dynasty was no longer the invincible and terrifying Tang dynasty. This battle allowed all the foreign barbarians around the Tang dynasty to see the weak side of the Tang dynasty. From then on, countless powers began to grow restless, and they stared hungrily at the Tang dynasty. Northwest, Northeast, North, Longxi. The Tang dynasty was embroiled in endless wars, and it fell into troubled times. A massive empire, the most powerful civilization in the history of the Central Plains, fell into decline, and it fell into decline. This was the eternal pain in the hearts of the people of the Tang dynasty. It was also the pain of the entire Central Plains. No matter what, Wang Chong had to change everything. Big uncle, I know that this matter has put you in a difficult position. But first uncle, please think about it. Since young, have I ever lied to first uncle? I know that big uncle is in a difficult position, and I have never asked big uncle for anything. But this time, I hope that big uncle can promise me no matter what. No matter how many people oppose me, or how many people slander me, I hope that big uncle can stop this war. This isn't just for the Wang clan, it's also for the Tang dynasty. One day, time will prove that I am right. At the end, Wang Chong clenched his fists tightly, and his head was pressed against the ground. His veins were bulging from the excessive force he was exerting. On this journey of vengeance, he was fated to be alone. Only by experiencing it for himself did he understand how difficult it was to change the fate of the empire and the world. There were far too many things in his heart that he couldn't tell anyone. Even someone as close as his big uncle couldn't convince him easily, much less anyone else. Wang Zhen looked at the kneeling Wang Chong, his heart deeply moved. Although Wang Chong hadn't said much, Wang Zhen could feel the unshakable will in his heart. Chonger, let me think about it. Wang Zhen sighed, closed his eyes, and fell silent. Military affairs were no trifling matter. One couldn't be swayed by emotions, and one couldn't neglect one's private interests for the sake of public interests. This was the principle that Wang Zhen had upheld for many years in the imperial court. If it were any other descendant of the Wang clan, even if it were his own son, Wang Li, Wang Zhen wouldn't even consider it. But Wang Chong, scenes of the past flitted through his mind. The regional commander's incident, the consort Taizhen incident, Wang Chong had proven himself time and time again, and it was Wang Chong who had been the first to discover the recent war in the southwest. Time and time again, he had proved that Wang Chong was right. He seemed to have some sort of foresight, always able to find the most correct path among the countless threads. "Chonger, tell me that you won't regret today's decision," Wang Zhen suddenly said. "Big uncle won't regret it." Wang Chong was overjoyed. His big uncle's words clearly indicated that he was agreeing. Wang Zhen suddenly gave a long sigh. "Chonger, I can agree to your request this time. This is the first time I've abandoned public interests for the sake of private interests, but it will also be the last time. Do you understand?" Wang Zhen opened his eyes. "Your nephew understands," Wang Chong sternly said. If he didn't know his big uncle's personality, Wang Chong wouldn't have let his big uncle off during the regional commander's incident and only tried to persuade the king of Song. "Speak. What else do you need me to do next?" Wang Zhen said, his expression much more relaxed. Wang Chong nodded. "Big uncle, after we return, please tell the king of Song that no matter what, he must personally make an appearance. In addition, I have a letter here that big uncle should give to Yang Zhao. If we want to change the decision of the imperial court, we need big uncle, the king of Song, and consort Taizhen. In addition, big uncle, please tell the king of Song that we aren't helping Mengshi Zhao. Jelifeng's ambitions are too obvious, and she must be punished, but not now. Ask him to stall for time and only act when he is fully prepared. So, from now on, big uncle and the king of Song should mobilize the army from the Bureau of Military Personnel to the southwest. Just the 180,000 soldiers in the southwest are far from enough to deal with Jelifeng. Only an army of 300,000 or more can deal with Jelifeng. That's impossible. Mobilizing an army is no small matter. Even the king of Song can't make such a decision on his own. He needs the approval of the other officials." Wang Zhen shook his head. The king of Song was an authoritative figure in the Bureau of Military Personnel, but he wasn't so powerful that he could blot out the sky with one hand. At the very least, King Qi's faction also wielded great authority in the Bureau of Military Personnel. Moreover, the Tang dynasty had always fought with the few against the many. The Tang dynasty had always walked the path of elite soldiers, and their soldiers were well equipped from head to toe. In terms of equipment, they were superior to all other powers. If they really mobilized 300,000 soldiers, they could easily crush Mengshi Zhao. That would be a war that could wipe out a country. Moreover, the Tang dynasty only had so many soldiers. If they mobilized 300,000 soldiers, the defense in other areas would become weaker, and that might cause even more trouble. Then we'll use the reserve army, the prefectural armies. This is the best source of soldiers, and we can bypass the Bureau of Military Personnel to minimize any resistance. Wang Chong's eyes were sharp as he spoke without hesitation. As the war saint of the Tang dynasty and the last commander-in-chief of the Central Plains, Wang Chong had a far more thorough understanding of the art of war than his big uncle. The battlefield is the best furnace. 3 months is enough to train a regular army that would take several years to reach the standard. The prefectural armies are the best source of soldiers. If a regular army existed in a perfect military system, there would definitely be a reserve army. Mengshi Zhao, Uzun, Goguryeo, and the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates were all examples. Although the Tang dynasty did not have many soldiers, they had always maintained a large reserve army. The number of reserve soldiers was not large, but there were at least 200,000 of them. Moreover, the training of the Tang dynasty was far more rigorous than that of other armies. It was a complete system. An army that had undergone such rigorous training could enter the battlefield at any time. This was also the reason why the Tang dynasty was able to maintain a stable number of soldiers despite fighting 1 against 6 and suffering many casualties every year. However, Reserve soldiers were still reserve soldiers, and they were severely lacking in battlefield experience. Although they could quickly train a large number of qualified and experienced soldiers by entering the battlefield, the casualties would probably be high. Moreover, such a transfer of reserve soldiers would cause a gap in the military pyramid of the Tang dynasty. The training of reserve soldiers would be severely lacking, and it would have a great impact on the future. Wang Zhen looked at Wang Chong with a strange look in his eyes. Wang Chong knew much more than he did. These words didn't seem like something a teenager like Wang Chong would be able to say. I will try my best to convince the King of Song. The war between the royal court and Meng Shizhao will definitely unfold. If it is unavoidable, this might be the best solution. Wang Zhen sighed. Also, there is one more thing I need to trouble Big Uncle with. Speak. This time, Wang Chong did not speak. Instead, he leaned forward and whispered in Wang Zhen's ear. Listen. Wang Zhen's body trembled. He understood Wang Chong's meaning. Big Uncle, no matter what, you must bring these words to Zhangqiu Jianqiong. The southwest is not our territory. Only Zhangqiu Jianqiong's words will be listened to by Xianyu Zhongtong. Wang Chong said. Meng Shizhao had never been a thorn in the heart of the Tang dynasty. The true thorn was Uzun. No matter what, they had to keep tabs on Uzun's movements. If they did not understand this, the tragedy of their previous life would only repeat itself. I understand. Leave this matter to me. In the end, Wang Zhen still left. With Wang Zhen gone, the dungeon became deathly silent. Come out. After his big uncle left, Wang Chong suddenly spoke without raising his head. At first, there was silence in the dark prison. After a while, a few figures appeared. Zheng Qinzhou led several experts from the Chamberlain of Dependencies out from the back. Wang Chong, I don't care what you're discussing with your big uncle. You won't be able to escape from this important matter. Zheng Qinzhou bluntly said. There's no need for you to worry about this matter. Wang Chong indifferently said. Zheng Qinzhou harumphed. Not wanting to invite a rebuff, he beckoned his subordinates over and left. Once everyone had left, Wang Chong once more extended a finger and began to write on the ground. Around him were countless square letters and maps of the Tang dynasty. Compared to a few days ago, they were several times more detailed and thicker. Chapter 469. The turmoil in the southwest had attracted the attention of the entire empire. Even Wang Chong could sense this from his prison cell. The people of the Court of Judicial Review and the Chamberlain of Dependencies had been watching him every day, but in this period of time, they had rarely appeared. The prison guards who occasionally came to deliver food also seemed absent-minded. The entire capital was somber. It seems like it's almost time to make a decision. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. Although he was anxious, there was nothing Wang Chong could do in his prison cell. He could only silently wait. Chonger. The next time he saw his big uncle was 10 days later. His big uncle was dressed in the robes of an official, his expression stern and inflexible. Upon seeing his big uncle, Wang Chong's eyes widened and he suddenly had an extremely ill foreboding. The imperial court has already made its decision. It has ordered Xianyu Zhongtong to lead 18 elites of the Annan Protectorate and immediately set out to attack the Meng Shizhao Empire in the southwest to punish Jelifeng's invasion of the Tang dynasty. What? Upon hearing this news, Wang Chong's heart chilled, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He suddenly remembered something and rushed to the bars of the cell. Big uncle, how could it be like this? Haven't you, the King of Song, and Consort Taizhen all intervened? Don't tell me the three of you have no way to stop it. The King of Song, the Wang clan, and the Consort Taizhen behind Yang Zhao were undoubtedly the three major factions of the Tang dynasty, three titans. The combined strength of these three factions was enough to influence the decisions of the imperial court. Wang Zhen sighed. He did not hide anything and gave a detailed account of what had happened. After meeting Wang Chong in the hidden prison, Wang Zhen immediately went to meet the King of Song. Furthermore, Yang Zhao was Wang Chang's sworn brother. These three forces were more than enough to change the entire royal court. However, both Wang Zhen and Wang Chong had underestimated one person. Is it the Yao family? A cold light flashed in Wang Chang's eyes as he suddenly interrupted. It would be fine if it's just the Yao clan and King Qi. Wang Zhen sighed and shook his head. Only those who had been involved in the court debate that day knew just how intense it had been. When Wang Zhen and the King of Song, who had always advocated war, stood out to oppose attacking Mengshi Zhao, the entire court was shocked. For a long time, there was a deathly silence in the hall. No one spoke. Even more surprising were the Yao clan and King Qi. These two clans had always been keeping an eye on the Wang clan and the King of Song, but when Wang Zhen and the King of Song stood out to oppose the war, the Yao clan and King Qi, who had always advocated for a retreat, suddenly stood out to criticize the Wang clan and the King of Song. They said that the two clans had colluded with one another, accepted Jelifeng's bribe, and strongly advocated for a war against Mengshi Zhao. But it would have been fine if things had ended there. After all, the Yao clan and King Qi were still inferior to the alliance of the Wang clan, the King of Song, and consort Tai Zhen. But in the end, no one could have expected the most illustrious and low-profile person to suddenly stand out and change the outcome of the court debate. Who? Wang Chang's heart tightened. It's the Prime Minister. Wang Zhen sighed deeply as he revealed the answer. Wang. The moment Wang Zhen said those words, the dark prison suddenly fell silent. Wang Chang's mouth was agape, and his pupils constricted. He was unable to say a single word. Li Zhenu, this name was like a bolt of lightning, rumbling through Wang Chang's mind, echoing endlessly. In that instant, thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind like snowflakes. In the Tang dynasty, there was no position higher than the Prime Minister. It was truly a position that stood above all but one. Both the Wang clan and the Yao clan were inextricably linked to this position. This was also the reason why the Wang clan was known as a clan of ministers and generals. However, both the Wang clan's old master Jiao and the Yao clan's old master Yao Chong had already retired from the position of Prime Minister. The current Prime Minister of the Tang dynasty had long since changed. Li Zhenu was that person's son. In the Tang dynasty, this person was abnormally low profile. There was no one else in the illustrious position of Prime Minister who could keep such a low profile. Many people had even forgotten about his existence. But Wang Chong had never dared to underestimate him. I didn't think that it would be him. A sharp light flashed through Wang Chong's eyes. In the entire Tang dynasty, the one that Wang Chong feared the most was not the Yao clan or King Qi, but this illustrious Prime Minister who always made people forget about him. In the entire great Tang Empire, apart from himself, perhaps even his uncle did not know how terrifying the Prime Minister, who was usually as amiable as a spring breeze, was. Everyone had greatly underestimated this Lord Prime Minister. Wang Chong had not expected this Lord Prime Minister to uncharacteristically join the War of the Southwest. The Yao clan, King Qi, and this Lord Prime Minister of the Tang dynasty were a force that could completely neutralize the power of the Wang clan, the King of Song, and consort Tai Zhen. In addition, there's one more thing. At the crucial moment, Zhangqiu Jianqiong stood on the side of King Qi and the Yao clan. Ah! Wang Chong was truly flabbergasted. Zhangqiu Jianqiong and consort Tai Zhen belonged to the same faction, and they had an extremely close relationship. It had been Zhangqiu Jianqiong who had sponsored Yang Zhao's entry into the capital. Consort Tai Zhen and Yang Zhao had opposed this war, but Zhangqiu Jianqiong, the Minister of War, had chosen to stand on King Qi's side. No one had expected this. One Lord Prime Minister was one thing, but now Minister of War Zhangqiu Jianqiong, the outcome of this court war was basically decided. Wang Chong fell silent. There's nothing we can do about it. His position as the Minister of War had not yet stabilized, and he was also the Anan Protector General of the Southwest. Now that a problem had arisen in his territory, the pressure on Zhangqiu Jianqiong could be imagined. Almost all of the generals under his command supported the war against Meng Shizhao. If Zhangqiu Jianqiong were to back down now, his position as the Minister of War would be in jeopardy. Wang Zhen helplessly said. Zhangqiu Jianqiong's desire for power was simply too strong. His 10-some years of oppression on the border had made his desire for power and status far stronger than anyone else's. Wang Zhen had originally thought that he could delay this court war for at least 20 days, but now that things had developed to this point, it was no longer up to him. There was nothing Wang Zhen could do. It was quiet in the dark prison. Regardless of whether it was Wang Chong or Wang Zhen, neither of them spoke. Only the flickering of the torches on the wall could be heard. Chonger, what do you plan to do next? Wang Zhen looked at his nephew in the prison and asked. All the plans had been arranged by Wang Chong, and he had told him what had happened in the court. Only Wang Chong could decide what to do next. I didn't think that I would still be unable to avoid it. Wang Chong gave a long and bitter sigh. When Zhelifeng attacked the Tang dynasty, the imperial court had decided that Xianyu Zhongtong would lead 180,000 Tang dynasty elites to the southwest. If Zhangqiu Jianqiong had been the one leading the army, if Zhangqiu Jianqiong was still in the southwest, the final result might have been a little better. But Zhangqiu Jianqiong had already been drawn to power, and the position of Minister of War had become a shackle around his neck. It was easy to leave for the southwest, but difficult to return to the southwest. A Minister of War could not leave the capital to command the 180,000 elites of a border protectorate. There had never been such a thing in the history of the Tang dynasty. Man proposes, but heaven disposes. He had been trying to avoid this war this entire time. But in the end, he still couldn't avoid it. With this, the last sliver of hope in Wang Chang's heart had been extinguished. Since it was unavoidable, he could only face it. Big uncle, when did Xianyu Zhongtong leave? Wang Chong raised his head and closed his eyes. 4 days ago. The news was sent by the fastest golden eagle of the court. It should be delivered in 2 days. Given Xianyu Zhongtong's reaction, it should be another 2 days before he leads the army out to make contact with the Meng Shizhao Empire. Wang Zhen said. It's already too late. Wang Chong mentally gave a long sigh. The journey from the capital to the Anan Protectorate was a long one. Even the fastest bird would take 6 days. By that time, the dust would have settled, and it would be too late to say anything. Big uncle, take me away from here, Wang Chong suddenly said. Bong bong bong. Crossing thousands of mountains and tens of thousands of rivers, passing through layers upon layers of space, in the distant lands of the southwest, dark clouds gathered. The beating of a drum suddenly soared into the sky. This heaven-shaking drumbeat startled the earth, startled the entire southwest. It had been a very long time since such a heavy drumming had been heard in the southwest. The last time such a thunderous rhythm had resounded through the skies had been 10-some years ago. By the order of the imperial court, we are here to punish Meng Shizhao and raise the might of my Tang dynasty. In front of the vast and imposing hall of the Anan Protectorate headquarters, an inflexible, solemn, and dignified voice resounded through the heavens. The newly appointed Anan Protector General, Xianyu Zhongtong, was dressed in armor, his body exuding a chilling and powerful aura as he stood on a tall platform. On the platform, banners fluttered in the wind, their lofty pillars reaching into the heavens. And on the platform, a majestic atmosphere prevailed. The 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty who had been stationed in the southwest were spread out in a dense formation, a dense mass of dark clouds in front of the Anan Protectorate headquarters. Fight! 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 The Tang dynasty elites waved their halberds, each of them letting out a heaven-shaking roar. Waves of essence chi burst out from their bodies like long rainbows, shooting straight into the depths of the dark clouds. The beating of the drums caused the earth to tremble. The mountains were silent, the mountains trembled, and the atmosphere was somber. Move out. Without further words, Xian Yuzhongtong gave the order. Warhorses neighed, and the 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty galloped and roared like a dark cloud toward the southern Mengxi Zhao Empire. For the first time in the history of the empire, the 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty had left the cities they had been guarding. After 10-some years, they were launching their first war against a foreign country. Other than a teenager in the distant capital, no one understood what this war truly meant. Even those who were in the game. Flap flap. Almost at the same time that Xian Yuzhongtong gave the order and the army set out, messenger pigeons soared into the sky from all over the city. These carrier pigeons did not fly to the capital of the Tang dynasty. Instead, they crossed the borders of the Tang dynasty and flew to the northeast, northwest, north, southwest, and west of the Tang dynasty. Goguryeo, the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, Uzun, Arabia, Karak-Spa-Xinu, countless powers were paying close attention to this conflict between the Tang dynasty and the Mengxi Zhao Empire in the southwest of the Central Plains. The southwest had always been peaceful. This was the Tang dynasty's first large-scale operation, and the scale of this operation far surpassed that of its operations in Longxi, the northeast, and the northwest. And this was also the first time the Mengxi Zhao Empire had participated in this conflict with the Tang dynasty. Chapter 470. Not long after Xian Yuzhongtong set off with his 180,000 elites, his gaze flitted across the vast earth, across the torrential Irai in the southwest and across the vast forests. Move out. A hoarse shout tore through the sky. In the southwest, a middle-aged man with a tall and imposing figure and a black mustache, who looked like a hero and a bold vision, wearing a flat crown and an imperial robe, suddenly raised the golden sword in his hand. Waves of majestic qi, like the mountains and the seas, soared into the sky from his body. Rumble. The entire earth seemed to have suddenly awakened from a long slumber. It suddenly shook violently and emitted bursts of loud rumbling sounds. Kill. 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 Boundless killing intent condensed into a tangible substance and soared into the sky, stirring up the winds and clouds. Across the vast earth, one could only see the countless Mengxi Zhao warriors, armed to the teeth, shrouded in thousands of black and white war halos. They were like a ferocious flood of steel, surging toward the distant Annan protectorate headquarters of the Tang dynasty. The rumbling of drums resounded through the world. Dark clouds churned in the sky. After 10-some years of peace, war had finally broken out in the southwest. Clang! A massive hammer swung down, smashing against a searing red iron. Sparks flew, the screeching of metal almost tearing apart one's eardrums. Clang clang clang. The massive hammer continued to swing down, once, twice, thrice, tens of thousands of times, and the number of hammers swung had increased from 1 to tens of thousands. On the massive Uzun plateau, flames roared and smoke roiled. Tens of thousands of short and capable Uzun blacksmiths were bare-armed, constantly swinging their hammers on this plateau, forging armor, sabers, swords, U-shaped horseshoes, arrows, and all sorts of other weapons in the open air. Sweat poured down their bodies, and it was through this scattered method that these Uzun blacksmiths forged an endless stream of weapons. Uzun's weapon forging was not as developed as the Central Plains, and it was not as effective. However, no one dared to underestimate the weapons forged on this plateau, because they used the most primitive and most direct method, 1,000 hundred refinement. Uzun's armor didn't have any artistic beauty, much less any technical content. However, their armor was indeed the most solid, sturdy, and durable armor in the world. The weight of an Uzun cavalryman's armor far surpassed that of the Tang dynasty, the Eastern and Western Turks, Goguryeo, or even the Abbasid Caliphate or Karak-Spa-Xinu. This also made it very difficult for normal weapons and attacks to cause harm to Uzun's cavalry. The creation of Uzun's armor was time-consuming and laborious, but it also made Uzun's armor last the longest among all the ordinary armors. This protracted armor training had begun a long time ago. Now, On the vast plateau, groups upon groups of weapons and armors were piled up together, forming a magnificent sight on this vast land. Flap flap. High up in the sky, wings flapped, and a pigeon as white as snow flew down through the thick smoke and sparks. Above the ground, a middle-aged scholar dressed in a white robe that touched the ground looked up and allowed the carrier pigeon to land on his hand. Ha ha ha, whooshu, it's finally begun. Daluan Ruozan faintly smiled as he flicked his finger, sending the letter flying out. The thin piece of paper in his hand was like a sharp blade, flying out at lightning speed. Clang! Not far away, General Huishu Wuzong of the Uzan Empire's Ngari royal lineage was standing in front of a small mountain of Uzan weapons. Seeing the letter fly over, he threw away the weapon in his hand and easily caught it. Jelifeng has come to ask us to send troops again. Huishu Huizang finished reading the letter in his hand as if he had expected this. Ha ha ha, this is the third letter. Daluan Ruozan faintly smiled, the corners of his mouth curling into a mocking smile. Ever since Meng Shizhao had retreated, Jelifeng had been sending letters non-stop, requesting the Uzan Empire to send troops and form an alliance. However, Daluan Ruozan had stopped all of them. Do you want him back? Huishu Wuzong turned his head and asked expressionlessly. No need. Daluan Ruozan waved his hand and sneered. Everything that needs to be said has been said. If Meng Shizhao wants to win the support of our Uzan, then come and show your loyalty. The world has been peaceful for decades. Is the current Tang dynasty as strong as before? Meng Shizhao is the best test. If the Tang dynasty wins and easily destroys Meng Shizhao, then it means that the time is not ripe yet. Our plan needs to be delayed. But if the Tang dynasty loses, then it means, it is the era of our Uzan. At the last sentence, Daluan Ruozan slowly raised his head. His gaze swept over the mountains and rivers, looking towards the distant southwest of the Tang dynasty. From the towering Uzan plateau, one could faintly see the billowing dust in the distance. Two steel armies were surging towards each other. Perhaps, it is the era of our Uzan. As this thought flitted through Daluan Ruozan's mind, his eyes gradually turned cold. Whether it was the Meng Shizhao Empire or the Tang dynasty, they were still no match for the Uzan. In this war in the southwest, the Uzan Empire was certain to be the final winner. As the days passed, Wang Chong calculated the state of the war in the southwest. Although Wang Chong hadn't taken part in the war, he had personally experienced it, so he remembered everything clearly. The future has already changed. The war between the Tang dynasty and Meng Shizhao has been brought forward by at least half a year. I can only hope that the course of this war will also change. Wang Chong quietly said to himself, his heart filled with worry. Although the gloomy prison was cut off from the rest of the world and could not hear news from the outside, Wang Chong could sense from the atmosphere that this war in the southwest had attracted the attention of the entire Tang dynasty. The air was suffused with the stench of something burning. And Wang Chong was more worried than anyone else. But Wang Chong still could not leave. The pressure from the Chamberlain of Dependencies and the Court of Judicial Review seemed to be far greater than he had imagined. Several days later, just when Wang Chong was about to reach his limit, a figure appeared in the gloomy prison. It was not his big uncle Wang Chong, but the Tang dynasty's the King of Song. Your Highness. Wang Chong was dumbfounded. In a flash, a very bad feeling welled up in his heart. Wang Chong, I have some very bad news for you. Separated by the bars, the King of Song's complexion was extremely unsightly. The Tang dynasty has lost. Xianyu Zhongtong has lost. What? Rumble. Like a thunderclap, Wang Chong suddenly stood up, his mouth agape in shock. How could this be? Chapter 471. The battle in the southwest was like a clap of thunder that shook the entire capital. While everyone was hoping that the new Annan Protectorate Protector General Xianyu Zhongtong would lead 180,000 Tang dynasty elites to defeat Meng Shizhao and punish Jelifeng, the battle in the southwest dealt a heavy blow. Emperor Jelifeng of the Mengshi Zhao Empire had mobilized all his forces, leading all 340,000 soldiers of Mengshi Zhao to engage in a decisive battle with the 180,000 Tang dynasty elites of the Annan Protectorate on the plains of the River. The disparity in numbers had resulted in the Annan Protectorate's defeat. The long journey meant that no further information was available for the time being. But the preliminary results were already extremely unsettling. In the northeast, Yuzhou, Anshi's Suiye, Longshi's Jishur, and the Yin Mountains of the north, the Tang dynasty had always held the upper hand, or at least the upper hand. But in the southwest, the Tang dynasty had rarely mobilized an army of 180,000 soldiers at a time. Furthermore, losing a battle on such a scale was something that had never happened before. Ever since the imperial court had received the news, it had dispatched hundreds of its most experienced spies to the southwest, traveling day and night to gather more information. And the imperial court was also discussing the issue of reinforcements. Whether it was Anxi, Annong, Anbei, or Longxi, the Tang dynasty was facing a powerful empire, a powerful foe. It was simply impossible to casually withdraw reinforcements. If it acted rashly and revealed a flaw, it would be an even greater crisis. Thus, reinforcements could only be sent from other parts of the interior. The imperial court sent out the second wave of reinforcements 2 days ago. This army is being led by the rising young general of the army, Li Zhengyi. It totals 60,000 soldiers, and they are carrying a large number of bows, ballistae, weapons, and rations for the southwest. You might not understand Li Zhengyi very well, but he's a leading figure of the younger generation in the army. He has participated in many major battles, and his performance is extremely eye-catching. Moreover, he became famous very early on in the army, and his reputation in the army is probably even above that of your big brother, Wang Fu. The King of Song said. The King of Song's expression had always been extremely grave, and when he spoke of the defeat in the southwest, it became even more somber. But when Li Junzheng was mentioned, the King of Song's expression was clearly much more relaxed. It was clear that he held Li Junzheng in high regard. Wang Chang's complexion turned extremely unsightly. History is repeating itself. Wang Chong murmured. At this moment, he felt an indescribable pain in his heart. How could Li Zhengyi not know? Li Zhengyi had indeed made a name for himself earlier than his elder brother, Wang Fu. In terms of talent, he was also publicly acknowledged to be formidable. He had first joined the Anxi Protectorate, taking up a post in the distant Suiye city to the west. There, his performance had been so dazzling that even Gao Xianji had praised him. Later on, he was transferred to Baiting, where he conquered the Turks many times, his performance even surpassing some of the generals in the army. In the army, Li Zhengyi was publicly acknowledged to have the potential to become a great general. The army had also chosen him as a promising leader of the younger generation, one who could replace the likes of Wang Zhongxi and Zhang Shogui and become the cornerstone of the empire. But no matter how formidable the imperial court was, no matter how talented Li Zhengyi was, he could never have imagined that their true opponents were not the people of Mengshi Zhao, not Jelifeng, not Fengjie, but the Uzun Empire's Huishu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen. The former was the #1 general of the Uzun Empire's Ngari royal lineage, possessing incredible offensive power. In the past, he had been appointed the invincible great general of the Uzun Empire, second only to the likes of Li Sai. The latter was a famed strategist of the Uzun Empire, possessing unparalleled ability to grasp opportunities. When the two of them worked together, even the 180,000 Tang dynasty elites under Zhangqiu Jianqiong's command would be in grave danger. In his 10-some years in the southwestern protectorate, Zhangqiu Jianqiong had never once attacked the Uzun Plateau. It wasn't that he was worried about Mengshi Zhao taking advantage of the situation, but that he wasn't confident that he would be able to defeat Huishu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen even if he left the south of rosy clouds. Although Li Zhengyi was powerful and talented, he couldn't compare to figures of the level of Huishu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen. And the soldiers he could muster from the interior were also incapable of dealing with the elite cavalry of the Uzun Empire. In a direct confrontation, Li Zhengyi's strength was already lacking, and he had been completely unprepared. One could easily imagine the fate that awaited him. Wang Chong had never imagined that the tragedy that had occurred back then would repeat itself. Your Highness, just as Wang Chong opened his mouth, a voice suddenly rang out. A turning point in the world. A major event, Uzun has intervened in the war between Tang and Mengshi Zhao. The Tang dynasty has been defeated, with 80,000 soldiers remaining. From now on, user is forbidden from revealing any information related to Uzun. From now on, if the army of the Southwestern Protectorate falls below 10,000 soldiers within 2 months, user will be considered to have failed the mission and will be killed. If the army of the Southwestern Protectorate is completely wiped out, user will be considered to have failed the mission and will be killed as well. User will not leave any traces in this world, including the memories of others. The countdown begins now. Wang. A jolt of electricity coursed through Wang Chong's body, causing him to tremble in shock. He couldn't utter a single word of what he wanted to say. Wang Chong, what's wrong? The king of Song asked with concern. Wang Chong's complexion didn't look too good. It's nothing. The pale-faced Wang Chong shook his head, his mind in disarray. Xianyu Zhongtong had been defeated. Not in battle, but in utter defeat. The Uzun had intervened in the war much earlier than he had expected. The 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty were already no match for the 340,000 elites of the Mengshi Zhao Empire. Now that there were more than 200,000 cavalry from the Uzun Gari royal lineage, the fate of Xianyu Zhongtong and the 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty could be easily imagined. I didn't think that it would still be too late. Wang Chong's heart sank to the bottom. Of the 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty, only 80,000 were left. The death toll had reached more than 100,000. The Annan Protectorate had finally suffered an unprecedented blow since its founding. When the last 80,000 elites of the Tang dynasty were annihilated by the combined might of Mengshi Zhao and the Uzun Empire, the 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty, the Annan Protectorate would become the first protectorate in the history of the empire to be disbanded because of war. But only Wang Chong knew that this was only the beginning. Without the 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty guarding the gates of the Tang dynasty, the millions of citizens of the Tang dynasty at the southwestern gate would be reduced to bones under the hooves of the iron hooves. And the eastern and western Turks, Goguryeo, the Abbasid Caliphate, Karak-Spazinu, the various kingdoms of the western regions, countless foreign countries would be encouraged to move. The borders of the Tang dynasty would no longer have a day of peace. As these countless thoughts flitted through his mind, the various memories of his last life floated to his mind. Gradually, the dazed look in his eyes faded. Wang Chong clenched his fists, his eyes slowly hardening. What had already happened could no longer be changed, but at least he could still fight for the future. If he was still unable to change the past after 2 rebirths, unable to prevent it, and had to watch as this tragedy repeated itself, then what need was there for him to exist? Your Highness, take me away from here. Wang Chong indifferently said as he looked ahead, his voice tinged with a unique tone. The king of Song stared blankly at Wang Chong in surprise. The current Wang Chong looked very different from usual, but he couldn't say what was different. It was as if something special was being released from his body. But King Song still quickly gave a grunt of acknowledgement and nodded. Taking Wang Chong away had always been his goal. Boom! Chapter 472. The area outside the government office was in chaos. Only when he walked outside did Wang Chong realize just how chaotic the capital was. The bustling and peaceful capital of the past was now much quieter. There were fewer hawkers on the streets, and everyone was in a hurry. Instead of talking about trade, they talked about Xianyu Zhongtong, Annan Protectorate, Uzun, Jelifeng, and other such names that one would rarely hear even once in several years. But the air was suffused with a sense of impatience and unease. It had been far too long since the Tang dynasty had suffered such a defeat. The defeat of 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty was enough to affect the empire. At this moment, it wasn't just the people of the capital who were paying attention. Even the generals of the army, the ministers of the imperial court, and the important ministers on the border were paying attention to this war. Everything seemed so familiar. "Young master." A familiar voice came from next to him. The eagle was standing on the street outside the government office, next to him a carriage drawn by 4 horses. It was clear that he had been waiting for a long time. But Wang Chong did not immediately get on the carriage. "Pass on my 3 orders." Wang Chong extended 3 fingers, his eyes looking forward with a profound gaze that seemed to peer into the depths of space-time. "First, immediately dispatch the guards of the clan to all the tea houses and taverns in the capital and hire all the experts of the true martial realm and above. No matter how noble or lowly, strong or weak, or how high the price, hire them all." Wang Chong said. "Yes, young master." The eagle stared blankly for a moment before rejoicing. This encounter and more than half a month of imprisonment had not weakened his will. The Wang Chong before him was still the calm and wise young master he remembered. Moreover, every time he issued this series of orders, it meant that he was about to make a major move. It was clear that his young master was about to take action. "Young master, is it related to the war in the southwest?" The eagle probed. While the entire empire was still unaware of the war in the southwest, only Wang Chong and the eagle were aware of it. While the entire empire was still discussing what to do, Wang Chong had already taken action. Although Wang Chong didn't understand why they were selling spirit veins, the eagle could guess what they were. Wang Chong neither nodded nor shook his head. Although it seemed ambiguous, the eagle, who had always been by his side and was very familiar with him, had already guessed what was going on. The war in the southwest had shaken the entire empire, causing everyone to be extremely worried. Ever since the establishment of the Tang dynasty, the crushing defeat of Annan Protector General Xian Yuzhongtong was a huge blow to the Han who had always believed that the Tang dynasty was unstoppable. Although an individual's ability was limited in a war, not to mention a teenager, the eagle always believed that his young master could do something. Perhaps others might not be able to do it, but their young master would definitely be able to. This sort of thing had happened many times in the past. Second, summon the 4 great swordsmithing clans, as well as all the sword shops and smiths in the capital, as well as all the swordsmiths, grandmaster swordsmiths, and inscription masters. Tell them that the Wang clan will buy out all the weapons of their clans. For the next 3 months, all the weapons they produce will belong to me. Buzz. The eagle raised his head and stared in shock at Wang Chong. There were more than 1,000 sword shops and smiths in the capital, and with the addition of the 4 great swordsmithing clans, buying out all the weapons produced by these shops and smiths for the next 3 months would require an astonishing sum. "Yes, young master." Although he was shocked, the eagle still immediately agreed. Third, summon Zhao Jingdian, Wei Anfang, Zhao Qiqin, and Huang Qian'er. Tell them to come see me at the Wang residence tonight. "Yes, young master." The eagle immediately replied. At this moment, the eagle no longer had any doubts. With these 3 orders, Wang Chong's image of a decisive and murderous man overlapped with his own. There were some people who could not be judged by age, and they would not be weakened by their circumstances. It was clear that Wang Chong was one such person. "Have you prepared the brush, ink, and paper?" Wang Chong said, not noticing the change in the eagle's expression. "Yes, young master." "It's in the carriage." The eagle deferentially said. Wang Chong nodded and said nothing more. "Your Highness, please." Only then did Wang Chong turn around and extend his right palm to the King of Song. The King of Song's carriage was parked nearby. Upon receiving Wang Chong's invitation, the King of Song's face froze, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "All right." The surprise soon faded. In just a moment, the King of Song returned to normal. He nodded, lifted his robes, and stepped into the carriage. Wang Chong followed closely behind. With a whoosh, he let down the curtain and stepped into the carriage. "Let's go." The carriage set off quickly. No one knew what Wang Chong and the King of Song discussed inside. A majestic force burst out from inside, instantly isolating the eagle's senses. No one knew what happened next. The eagle only knew that when the King of Song walked out of the carriage, his expression was very ugly. After the King of Song left, the carriage regained its peace. Half a month's time, only half a month's time at most. Whether I succeed or not depends on this half a month. In the carriage, Wang Chong's eyes glistened. He quickly unfolded a piece of paper, pressed it down with a paperweight, dipped a pen in ink with his right hand, and started writing. The first letter was written by Wang Chong to his father, Wang Yan, and his elder brother, Wang Fu. Xianyu Zhongtong was a typical general who defended a city. Furthermore, he was a stickler for form and lacked variety. He was only suitable for defending a city in battle. Furthermore, his talents were not suitable for commanding an army of 180,000, let alone dealing with top-notch opponents like Hushu Wuzong, Daluan Ruozhen, Jelifeng, and Duan Gechuan. In his previous life, Xianyu Zhongtong had been defeated by them. The 180,000 soldiers struggled and resisted with all their might, but only managed to save Xianyu Zhongtong's life. To save the remaining 80,000 generals and preserve the strength of the Tang dynasty as much as possible, Wang Chong could only trust his father and elder brother. Father and elder brother, Wang Chong presents. Wang Chong's head was slightly lowered, his chest agitated. The brush moved like lightning across the paper, writing line after line of heavy characters. Other than Wang Chong himself, no one knew that the fate of the Southwest and the lives of the remaining 80,000 soldiers would be decided in these lines of regular script. Flap flap. After the first letter was written, a messenger pigeon soared into the sky, flying toward the southwest. After writing the first letter, Wang Chong didn't hesitate to write a second, a third, a fourth. Some of these letters flew to the southwest, some to the southeast, some to the inside of the city, some to the outside. Eagle after eagle, magpie, and messenger pigeon flew down from the sky, landing on the roof of the carriage, and then flying off in all directions, carrying the snow-like letters with them. Other than Wang Chong, not even the nearby eagle knew what was written in these letters. Young master, seeing Wang Chong's solemn and focused expression, Eagle gave a long sigh. His heart ached, but he wisely chose not to disturb him. Chapter 473. The first day in the capital was destined to be difficult to calm down. Whoosh! Messenger pigeons flew in all directions in the city. On a mountain range over 10 li away from the city, a slightly plump young figure was currently cultivating with his eyes closed. Surging stellar energy shot out from his body, turning into thick white pillars of qi. They coiled around his body like huge pythons, making the youth's aura seem extremely powerful. Receiving the messenger pigeon, Wei Hao had a look of astonishment in his eyes. Then, he tore open the letter and started reading. Ha ha ha, Wang Chong, you bastard, you finally came to look for me. Pang! Clenching his fist, the letter in his hand shattered into pieces. Youngster Wei suddenly burst out laughing excitedly. There wasn't much content in the letter that Wang Chong had given him. There were only a few simple sentences, lend me 20 guards. What were 20 guards to a childhood friend who had grown up with him? Even if the Wei residence's rules were strict, even if he had to take the risk of being reprimanded by his father, youngster Wei would definitely help Wang Chong. What 20? Even if it was 200, he would think of a way to help him. Boom! The air trembled, emitting a metallic sound. Beneath youngster Wei, an obsidian-like halo of thorns shot out majestically. Following that, it was 2, 3, 4. In a short period of time, youngster Wei's aura had broken through from the essence Qi realm to the true martial realm, then from the first level of the true martial realm, second level, third level, all the way to the fourth level of the true martial realm. It even showed signs of breaking through to the fifth level of the true martial realm. At this moment, youngster Wei's aura was majestic and filled with boundless strength. The strength of his aura even surpassed that of Wang Chong. This was the might of the mountain ascension art. This cultivation technique of youngster Wei was given to him by Wang Chong, and it was a top-notch technique with extremely powerful might. The mountain ascension art was extremely difficult to cultivate, and it had a very high requirement for one's physique. Especially at the essence Qi realm, it was even more difficult. But once one broke through to the true martial realm, its might would be incomparably powerful. Ever since youngster Wei entered the Kunwa training camp, Wang Chong rarely went to look for him. Whether it was dealing with the Goguryeo assassins or dealing with an Yaluoshan, Wang Chong had never called him over. His goal was to have him focus on cultivation. Wang Chong would do his best to help this childhood friend of his. The golden ginsangs he obtained from the Goguryons were at least 100 years old. After Wang Chong reached the true martial realm, he did not use it much. However, with youngster Wei, Wang Chong had always provided it to him without any restrictions. The mountain ascension formula was different from other cultivation techniques. The effects of the Goguryeo ginseng on him were far greater than that of Wang Chong's. Furthermore, it was extremely difficult for the mountain ascension art to break through from the essence energy rank to the true martial realm. However, if he had the Goguryeo ginseng, he would be able to achieve greater results with half the effort. Currently, the amount of Goguryeo ginseng that youngster Wei had consumed was at least 20 to 30 times that of Wang Chong. Moreover, even though Wang Chong forbade others from getting close to the spirit vein, youngster Wei could freely ascend and descend the mountain to cultivate. However, after reaching the true martial realm, the mountain ascension formula no longer required simple origin energy of heaven and earth. Instead, it required the mountain essence energy of a higher level. This sort of thing was different from any other origin energy of heaven and earth. Under normal circumstances, it was extremely difficult to cultivate without a unique cultivation technique like the mountain ascension formula. Thus, after reaching the true martial realm, youngster Wei left the spirit vein and entered the depths of the mountain range. The more primitive the surrounding mountains were, the more numerous they were, and the more inaccessible they were, the denser the essence Qi of the mountains. Youngster Wei was a martial arts fanatic to begin with, and he was crazy about it. When he cultivated, there was no difference between day and night, day and night. In addition, he did not have to worry about miscellaneous matters like Wang Chong. Together with a martial art like the mountain ascension formula, he was a match made in heaven. Thus, youngster Wei's current level of cultivation was even higher than Wang Chong's. Compared to his last life, youngster Wei had undoubtedly reached a level that he could never have reached in his previous life. Something must have happened for Wang Chong to borrow guards from me. I have to go and take a look. A gleam flashed in youngster Wei's eyes as he suddenly stood up. With a swoosh, he leaped out like a monkey, covering over 10 meters with a single step. In just a few leaps, youngster Wei was like a fierce tiger or elephant, vanishing from the mountain range. At the same time, in another part of the capital, there was a 3-story tea house with high eaves and ancient decorations that exuded an air of elegance and grandeur. A beautiful figure furrowed her brows. Her slender porcelain fingers held a 5-inch tall celadon teacup. She seemed to have a lot on her mind. Flap flap. The sound of wings flying through the air could be heard. A hint of surprise flashed through Bai Siling's eyes as she subconsciously raised her head. He saw a snow-white messenger pigeon spread its wings, drew an arc in the air, swept over the high eaves of the tea house, and flew towards him. Bai Siling froze for a moment, then subconsciously stretched out her arm to catch the pigeon. It's him. Opening the letter and seeing the familiar and crooked handwriting, Bai Siling's creased brows suddenly began to unfurl like ink. The worries of the past few days had melted away, and Bai Siling's lips perked up into a smile like the blossoming of a flower. I just knew that the prison wouldn't be able to hold you. Bai Siling gave a confident smile. Picking up the teacup on the table, she took a light sip, feeling the lingering fragrance on her lips. With the worry in her heart finally put to rest, Bai Siling felt much more relaxed. As for the contents of Wang Chang's letter, she didn't care much about it. Putting down the teacup, Bai Siling took light steps and swiftly left the tea house. Ha ha ha, 20 true martial realm experts. Wang Chong, you really aren't one to be left out. In the training grounds of the Su clan, a pigeon perched on Su Gan's shoulder. One of his hands was holding onto a red spear made of white poplar, and the other was holding onto the letter written by Wang Chong. You've just been released from the prison, and you're already asking for soldiers? Are you going to make a move again? The southwest? Su Gan raised his head slightly, and his deep gaze seemed to peer into the depths of time and space. Su Gan had always felt deep respect for Wang Chong, who was even younger than him. Wang Chang's way of thinking, Wang Chang's actions, and his boldness and ambition were all things that Su Gan had always felt inferior to. Su Gan was glad that he had met Wang Chong during the mission in the training camp. The scions of the great clans, especially those of the direct line of descent, were all proud and arrogant, but Su Gan had never felt the same way about Wang Chong. If there was one person in the entire capital that he admired from the bottom of his heart, it could only be Wang Chong. Whoosh! With a flick of his wrist, the red-tasseled great spear in his hand let out an ear-piercing whistle like a thick and heavy flood dragon. With a whoosh, it accurately landed on the weapons rack 60 to 70 feet away. Let's go. Last time, it was Zhang Shogui and biting Vice Protector General and Sishun. I wonder who's following me this time. Following him, I really don't have to worry about wasting my life. Wiping the sweat off his neck with a towel, Su Gan strode out of the training grounds. Ha, as expected of someone that I, Zhao Yadong, admire. Nothing can stop you. I didn't do anything. Su Bai cried out in grievance. He truly had been wrongly accused. He had been fooling around in a tea house when his father had sent guards to kidnap him. To tell the truth, Su Bai had been scared half to death that Wang Chong had sent a letter to the Duke Su residence, even more shocked than his father. Didn't do anything? If he didn't do anything, why would he send a letter to our Duke Su residence? Unfilial son, remember this, I don't care about anyone else in the capital. As for that Wang Chong, no matter how great your grudge was with him, stay as far away from him as possible. Duke Su harshly rebuked. Why? Isn't that brat relying on the fact that he has the King of Song to help him? Otherwise, given the trouble he's caused, he's dead for sure. Su Bai angrily yelled. You also know that he's dead for all the trouble he's caused. Then why don't you think about why he can't die? Who are Zhang Shogui and Sishun? One is the Anong Protector General and the other is the Biting Vice Protector General. Both of them are great generals of the empire. You can't even provoke one of them, much less two of them. If the King of Song releases Wang Chong, it's fine if the others don't say anything. But do you think that Zhang Shogui and Sishun don't dare to say anything? Although the status of the great generals of the empire is lower than that of an imperial prince of the Tang dynasty, they don't need to worry too much. Why don't they say anything? Su Bai's mouth fell open, and then he froze. It was true that the King of Song had released Wang Chong from prison. The others could be ignored, but what about Zhang Shogui and Sishun? Others might be afraid of the King of Song, but they might not be afraid of him, right? If his father had not brought it up, Su Bai would have never considered this question. Father, you mean? Su Bai gazed at his father and asked in bewilderment. If it weren't for His Majesty's will, do you think that Zhang Shogui and Sishun would let this matter go? The regional commander's incident was such a major affair that the entire court was in an uproar, but they couldn't do anything to him. This time, all he did was kill a few people under Zhang Shogui and Sishun's command. Do you really think that anything will happen? Zhang Shogui has always been praised for his clear-mindedness, his 8 apertures open. If he hadn't figured out His Majesty's intentions, he would never have let this matter go. As for Sishun, although he's a Hu and doesn't have many thoughts, he's loyal and devoted to His Majesty. Do you think that a who like him managed to become biting vice protector general by luck? It's one thing for the others, but he clearly understands His Majesty's intentions. And Sishan must have received His Majesty's orders to understand the will of the heavens. That's why the King of Song was able to release Wang Chong so smoothly, Duke Su indifferently said. Duke Su indifferently said. There was no way he would let Wang Chong off so easily. However, having worked in the imperial court for many years, he had a clear understanding of all sorts of political struggles. If one wanted to remain in the political world for a long time, one had to have a keen sense for politics. Su Bai was dumbstruck, unable to say a single word. He only knew that the King of Song had gone to save Wang Chong, but he had no idea that there was so much more to the story. The inner workings of the imperial court were far more complicated than he had imagined. Send a few people. Let's see what he's up to first, Duke Su said with a wave of his hand. Similar events were taking place in various parts of the city at almost the same time. It wasn't just the Bai clan and the Su clan that had some sort of relationship with Wang Chong. Even noble clans like Duke Lu and Duke Su, who didn't have much of a relationship with the Wang clan, had received invitations. Other than the Yao clan and King Qi, which were sworn enemies of the Wang clan, almost all the other clans with some status in the capital had received invitations. The entire capital had been mobilized by Wang Chong's letters. No one knew what Wang Chong was up to. But there was no question that the letters Wang Chong had written on the carriage back to his residence had once more set the capital abuzz. Chapter 475. Zhao Jingdian, Wei Anfang, Zhao Qiqin, and Huang Qian'er arrived at the Wang clan residence very late at night. The Wang clan residence was brightly lit, and after Wang Chong invited them into his study, he closed the door. No one knew what they were talking about, only that Zhao Jingdian, Wei Anfang, Zhao Qiqin, and Huang Qian'er all had nasty complexions when they came out of Wang Chong's study. The four of them were completely out of sorts, all of them so absent-minded that they didn't even hear the Wang clan guards call for them. They left the Wang clan residence that night. But the light in Wang Chong's study did not go out. After they left, Wang Chong's silhouette on the table was reflected on the paper window, and the rustling of a brush could be heard. But the door was tightly shut, and no one knew what Wang Chong was doing inside. Lion City has long since been constructed, and a large amount of food has already been stored in the city. This is the last chance for Xianyu Zhongtong and the Annan Protectorate Army. In the study, the candles flickered as Wang Chong stared at the table, his expression unprecedentedly grave. On Wang Chong's table was a miniature model of the southwest. All the valleys, mountains, rivers, plains, cities, and forests, all of them were vivid and lifelike. Wang Chong had borrowed this model from the Bureau of Military Personnel a long time ago and found skilled craftsmen to make it. In the Tang dynasty, everything that involved the geography of the mountains, rivers, and even the defensive positions of the garrisons were classified secrets. Secretly keeping such a model was a major crime. But Wang Chong had never cared, and this model had always been hidden in his study. The defeat of the Annan Protectorate Army in the southwest was already a foregone conclusion. The past could no longer be changed, but there was still hope. If nothing unexpected happens and everything is still the same, then the battle between Xianyu Zhongtong and Jelifeng will definitely take place on these plains. Wang Chong stared at the model, countless thoughts flitting through his mind. At this moment, he didn't look like a young and inexperienced teenager at all. In a daze, Wang Chong had once again reverted to the great Tang commander-in-chief from his previous life, a man with the sun and moon in his chest, commanding an army of thousands, commanding a mighty army with a flick of his finger, and deciding the outcome of a battle. Whoosh! Wang Chong took out a small flag and stuck it into the Urai plain on the sand table. As the war saint revered by the world in his previous life, Wang Chong had experienced thousands of battles, big and small. Even Wang Chong himself couldn't count them all. Even a layman who didn't know anything would be a good commander if he could survive thousands of battles, let alone Wang Chong. As long as Jelifeng wasn't an idiot and Duangachuan was still the commander, then the location of their decisive battle would definitely be the Urai Plains. Only the Urai Plain could accommodate so many soldiers. In his previous life, it wasn't without reason that the Tang dynasty and Meng Shizhao chose that place for their decisive battle. And if the decisive battle was held there, as long as Xian Yuzhongtong wasn't completely muddle-headed, as long as he was still a normal person, then he would definitely be able to see this place. Wang Chong took out a small red flag as thick as a toothpick and stuck it into the Lion City, behind the Urai Plains without hesitation. Wang Chong hadn't been to the Lion City yet, so he didn't know what this city that cost him millions of taels of gold looked like. But with Zhang Shouji's ability, once it was built, Wang Chong didn't hesitate. This magnificent city would definitely be the most prominent existence near the Urai Plains. Even if it was hundreds of miles away, it would definitely be able to discover this Lion City, forged from steel and iron. This Lion City was built by Wang Chong for himself, and at the same time, it was also built by Wang Chong for the 180,000 Tang dynasty soldiers. This was their only hope of survival. In his previous life, the 180,000 Tang dynasty soldiers had nowhere to hide after the Battle of Urai, and the infantry definitely couldn't outrun the cavalry. That was why the 180,000 Tang dynasty elite soldiers were completely annihilated. Except for Xian Yuzhongtong, who barely escaped with his life, the rest of the army was completely annihilated. But Wang Chong's Lion City became the only chance of survival for the 180,000 Tang dynasty soldiers. Wang Chong was almost certain that the remaining 80,000 Tang dynasty soldiers had definitely escaped into the Lion City. Otherwise, the 180,000 Tang dynasty elites would have been completely annihilated, and Wang Chong would have been obliterated by the Stone of Destiny because he had failed in his mission. But Wang Chong knew very well that a single Lion City would definitely not be able to change the fate of the remaining 80,000 soldiers and the situation of the entire Southwest. There was no city in the world that could not be breached, and this Lion City was no different. The 300,000 Meng Shizhao army that Jelifeng had built with the strength of the entire nation, together with the 200,000 soldiers of the Uzan Empire's Ngari royal lineage in the southeast, was definitely enough to break through any city. There was no way that the Lion City would be able to hold out for too long. The Lion City that Wang Chong had spent an enormous sum of money to build could only provide the remaining 80,000 Tang dynasty soldiers with a temporary respite. This respite would not last long. Moreover, even if Lion City was sturdy and impregnable, it could not last for too long. Although Wang Chong had already stored a large amount of rations in the city, this little bit of rations was definitely not enough for the 80,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty, who had to fight day and night, ready to go to the battlefield at any moment. Before the troops and horses move, the rations and fodder must move first. Without sufficient rations, the army would collapse on its own. If he wanted to save the remaining 80,000 Tang dynasty soldiers and change the course of the southwest, he had to act before the rations ran out. There was not much time left for Wang Chong. Wang Chong's gaze swept over the sand table, over the geography of the southwest. The 300,000 Meng Shizhao army and the 200,000 Uzan army of the Ngari royal lineage was not a force that a trifling 80,000 soldiers could resist. Even if his father and Li Jingyi's tens of thousands of soldiers were added together, it would still not be enough. But Wang Chong had no choice. Moreover, although it was not easy to defeat many with fewer, it was not impossible, at least for Wang Chong. As long as one made good use of the geography and terrain and added appropriate tactics, it was not impossible in the art of war. In this world, no one understood the meaning of these words better than Wang Chong. Wang Chong was searching for this geography and terrain. Swish! 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 One small banner after another fell from Wang Chong's hand, landing on various places on the sand table. Hills, forests, rivers, mountains, all the places where the small banners had been inserted were projected into Wang Chong's mind. The sand table was empty. Nothing had happened. But in Wang Chong's mind, thousands upon thousands of soldiers were roiling about. Meng Shi Zhao's army, Uzun's army, and the Tang army trapped in Lion City, all of this seemed to have a life of its own as it played out in Wang Chang's mind. This was Wang Chang's first time using psychic energy to deduce the changes in the War of the Southwest. Deduction of soldiers was a skill that any commander had to possess. But even the most formidable commander could only deduce tens or hundreds of thousands of soldiers. No one had ever been like Wang Chong, able to mentally deduce a massive war of 700,000 soldiers. Moreover, this war involved famous generals and great generals like Zhelifeng, Fen Jie, Duan Gechuan, Daluan Ruozhen, and Hushu Wuzong. The tactics of famous generals and great generals were unfathomable. If someone were to see what Wang Chong was doing, they would assuredly be dumbstruck. This was because in order to deduce top-class figures like Hushu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen, one had to have an extremely deep understanding of their opponents, and one had to completely surpass them in terms of strategy. Only in this way could one smoothly deduce. But what Wang Chong was doing was precisely this sort of thing. Chapter 476. Buzz. Wang Chang's mind continued to run simulations. The positions of the red flags kept changing as he plucked them out one by one. In the end, when everything in his mind had settled down, the number of red flags in his mind had also been reduced to a bare minimum. There were only 7 or 8 flags left. 80,000 soldiers, half infantry and half cavalry, and a phalanx of sharpshooters. We can't escape from Uzun's warhorses. If a battle is inevitable, this will be the place. Wang Chong muttered to himself. Finally, he extended his finger and drew a circle on the sand table in the southwest direction. Even though the surroundings were silent, Wang Chong knew that this would be the place of the final battle. The 80,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty and the fate of the Tang dynasty would most likely be decided in this area. Considering all the factors, distance, speed, and rations, this would be the last hope of the Annam Protectorate. I'll do my best and leave the rest to fate. The rest will depend on luck. Wang Chong thought to himself. It was as if a huge stone had been lifted from his heart. One wrong step leads to many wrong steps. In a war, predicting the enemy's moves was the most basic prerequisite. Facing top-notch generals like Hushu Wuzong and Duan Gechuan, trying to determine the location of the battle in advance, lure them over, and make preparations was something unimaginable for most people. But for Wang Chong, he had encountered stronger enemies before. None of this was a problem. Although reincarnation lowered his cultivation, it did not affect his instincts and attainments in the art of war. Time passed slowly. Wang Chang's pen moved quickly. The map on his desk grew thicker and thicker. War was never a simple matter of reasoning. It was much more complicated than this. Wang Chong had to be prepared for everything. No matter what the situation was, he could deal with it. The Eagle, send 3 people to these 3 locations. I want them to investigate in detail, then draw out a map of the terrain and give it to me. After an unknown amount of time, Wang Chong finally opened the door to the study with a pale face. He walked in somewhat weakly. In his hands, there were a few blueprints. Yes, young master. The Eagle took the blueprint and glanced at Wang Chang's slightly sunken black eye circles. His eyes couldn't help but waver. How's the matter of bribing all the sword shops and smiths in the capital for 3 months? How's it going to go? Wang Chong said. In addition to the time he spent in the dark prison, Wang Chong had not had a good rest for a long time. Even so, Wang Chong didn't feel sleepy in the slightest. Instead, his eyes were bright and full of expression, as if he had boundless energy. Replying to young master, we have already sent out the guards in the mansion. However, time was still very short. It hadn't been a long time since the young master came out. Even though we've contacted quite a number of sword shops and smiths, they haven't made their stance clear yet. We should need some time before we can get their reply. The Eagle lowered his head and said sincerely. Even though he had been by Wang Chang's side, ever since he returned yesterday, he had been executing the things that Wang Chong had said. However, unlike the average person, the eagle didn't move, but his messenger pigeons and various eagles never stopped. However, involving so many sword shops and smiths, it wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. One night's time was obviously not enough. Moreover, the real negotiation, signing of the contract, and going to the Supreme Court to be notarized also required time. If you need time, then the price is too low. Wang Chong sneered. Even though he was young, he wasn't a 3-year-old kid. In a place like the capital, if the deal couldn't be done quickly, it meant that the bargaining chips weren't enough. The eagle, let me ask you. How much money did you raise when I asked you to auction off the spirit vein? Wang Chong asked. With his hands behind his back, his long hair and robes danced in the wind. His body naturally exuded the aura of an aristocratic family's scion, yet it didn't lose the masculine aura of a military family. Young master, even if you didn't ask, I would have told you. 1/3 of the spirit vein's mountain has been sold, and we've raised 8 billion taels of gold. 8 billion taels of gold. Wang Chong took a deep breath, his face full of shock. Even though he was the one who started it, Wang Chong couldn't believe his ears. Because this number was far beyond his expectations. Yes, young master. The price of the auction was much higher than our initial estimate. However, even though it's 8 billion taels of gold, the actual amount isn't that much. When we started the auction, the aristocratic families didn't have so much money. Therefore, a large portion of the money was paid by the families using their family's assets or other treasures. The eagle said apologetically. The spirit vein was a priceless treasure, and any family that obtained it would view it as a treasure. But unexpectedly, in the hands of Wang Chong, it was tossed aside like a shoe, and he took it out for auction. The aristocratic families in the capital went crazy. However, the price of the spirit vein was still very high, and it wasn't something that ordinary families could afford. Thus, most of the spirit veins were auctioned off using gold as well as the family's assets. However, even so, it was still a huge number. How much is left? Wang Chong asked. Around 200 million taels of gold. The eagle replied. This number was a little different from what he had reported initially, but he had no other choice. The Wang clan didn't have any decent, large-scale businesses. They weren't like the other clans, who had an endless supply of assets and income. Old Eagle had only thought of this method after starting from this point of view. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to collect so much gold. Even the eagle didn't know Wang Chong's true motive. 200 million taels is more than enough. Wang Chong said calmly. His gaze was calm, and he seemed to have a card up his sleeves. Take out 100 million taels and have the guards of the clan bring the gold to those swordsmiths and shops to negotiate with them. I want to hear their reply after today. Also, use the remaining 100 million taels to help me find the swordsmithing clans and swordsmiths around the capital. Even though their smithing abilities can't compare up to the swordsmiths and swordsmiths in the capital, they are more than enough to forge what I want. Wang Chong said without hesitation, his expression calm. The eagle stared at Wang Chong in shock, and he hesitated. 200 million taels of gold was the result of the Wang clan selling the spirit vein. What Wang Chong was doing now was using money to pave the way. This was much more disadvantageous than under normal circumstances. Yes, Gongzi. Old Eagle wanted to say something but hesitated. He wanted to say something to stop Wang Chong, but he changed his mind. Wang Chong's will was firm, and it seemed like it wouldn't change. It was clear that nothing he said would be of any use. Wang Chong nodded. Have all the great clans of the capital been informed? When will they come? According to Gongzi's wishes, they have all been informed. They should arrive in around 4 hours. The eagle said. I understand. I'll go in and work for a while. Inform me when they arrive. After which, Wang Chong turned around and walked in. Yes, Gongzi. The eagle's voice came from behind him, but in the next moment, pang! A powerful force struck a major acupoint on his back. Wang Chong's body jolted, and like a punctured ball, all the strength in his body vanished. A powerful wave of fatigue swept through him. The eagle, Wang Chong's body went limp. This was the last thought in his mind. Gongzi, I've offended you. You really need a good rest. If you go on like this, I'm afraid you'll collapse. The eagle supported Wang Chong's body and let out a long sigh. Ever since he had entered the prison, Wang Chong had been in high spirits. He didn't seem tired at all. But the eagle knew that he was in a state of extreme exhaustion. It wasn't just physical exhaustion. A martial artist's body was much stronger than an ordinary person's. What worried the eagle the most was Wang Chong's mental state. Since half a month ago, Wang Chong's brain had been operating at full speed. The eagle had seen him a few times. He had been writing and drawing in the prison. Even though he couldn't understand what Wang Chong was writing, the eagle could guess that it had something to do with the southwest of the empire. A person's body would not be so exhausted. If Wang Chong continued like this, the eagle was worried that he would run out of energy. Rest well, Gongzi. Leave the rest to me. Chapter 477. Wang Chong woke up 4 hours later. Gongzi, the clans have arrived. A familiar voice sounded by his ear. Opening his eyes, Wang Chong immediately saw the eagle standing by his bed, his body bowed respectfully. Wang Chong was taken aback, and then he smiled bitterly in understanding. The eagle, I know you meant well. But don't do it again. Yes, Gongzi. The eagle understands. The eagle did not talk back. Wang Chong smiled bitterly, not dwelling on this matter. The eagle had a good personality, and Wang Chong knew that it was for his own good. However, time was tight, and there were too many things to do. How could he rest so easily? Where are the people from the clans? Wang Chong asked. In the main hall. I only came to inform Gongzi after I made arrangements for them. The eagle said. Wang Chong took a deep breath, nodded, and quickly left the room. The main hall of the Wang clan was packed with people. The clans of the Wang clan were all gathered here. The Wang clan was a clan of ministers and generals, and its status far surpassed that of the other clans. Ordinary clans could not even step through the gates of the Wang clan. Moreover, under the influence of the old master, the Wang clan was very strict, and they rarely invited other clans into their residence. To the clans of the capital, this was the first time they had been invited into the Wang clan residence. However, at this moment, the atmosphere in the lobby was not harmonious at all. What does the Wang clan want? Why hasn't anyone appeared after so long? Is this how the Wang clan wants to borrow people from us? What borrow? You've agreed, but I haven't. I want to see what right the Wang clan has to make such a request. That's right, that's right. Even if Duke Jiao is famous throughout the world, he can't do this, can he? We don't even have many true martial realm cultivators, so why should we lend them to the Wang clan? And a true martial tier 4 or 5 expert at that. The main hall was bustling with activity, but the atmosphere was not friendly. These bastards. When the eagle came out with Wang Chong, they saw such a scene. The eagle's eyebrows twitched. It's all right. Wang Chong smiled. Just as the eagle was about to beat someone up, he suddenly pulled him back. Unlike the eagle, Wang Chong only needed one glance to know what was going on. Someone is setting the pace. Wang Chong said calmly in his heart. He clearly understood the situation before him. With so many aristocratic families in the capital, it was inevitable that they would be unwilling to lend their precious true martial realm experts to others. But for so many people to work together to cause a ruckus in the Wang clan's hall was definitely abnormal. If someone wasn't intentionally causing trouble, there was no way that so many people would be so united in such a manner to denounce him. However, Wang Chong didn't care at all. If he didn't have some confidence in this operation, he would never have dared to do such a thing. He was not only confident that he could convince the great clans of the capital to willingly lend him their experts. Even if it was those people who were intentionally causing trouble, Wang Chong was confident that he could completely convince them. In truth, he wouldn't be the one begging them. They would probably be the ones begging him. I've kept everyone waiting. With a wave of his sleeve, Wang Chong and the eagle walked into the hall. It's young master. Young Master Chong has come. Wang Chong's appearance immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the hall. Wang Chong glanced around. There were quite a few people in the room, but compared to the number of people he had invited, it was only a tiny fraction. Furthermore, most of the people who appeared here were not true members of the aristocratic families. Instead, most of them were subordinates of the aristocratic families. No wonder he was so easily instigated by others and used as a tool. Wang Chong quietly said to himself, now fully aware of everything. Young Master Chong, what does young Master Chong want to borrow people for? Young Master Chong, Duke Jiao has always been revered. If the Wang clan has a need, our Li clan will do its utmost to help. However, even we don't have enough true martial tier 4 or 5 experts. Young Master Chong, I truly apologize. Our clan leader hasn't been around in the past few days, so we can't give you a reply. Thus, we sent me here to apologize to young Master Chong. I hope that young master can understand. Young Master Chong, these are 2 deep-sea Xian pearls that represent a small token of our Yu clan's appreciation. As for the matter of 10 true martial realm experts, forgive us for not being able to do it. Our Yu clan also doesn't have enough people, so I'm not sure if 2 true martial realm experts will be enough. Wang Chong coldly watched from the sidelines. All sorts of people had appeared in the hall. There were those who directly refused, those who wanted to refuse but were wary of the Wang clan's influence, so they found other excuses, and there were also those who wanted to negotiate and reduce the number of people. Previously, when the eagle had struck his acupuncture point, while he had been unconscious, the measures taken by the person who had secretly set the pace had clearly been effective. But Wang Chong wasn't surprised by this result in the slightest. True martial realm experts were extremely important to the great clans. Moreover, the imperial court had always been extremely strict with the experts of the great clans. Every great clan had people serving in the army, and if there were too many experts in the clan, they would immediately request to be forcibly inducted into the army and put under the control of the army. Thus, the number of experts that the great clans could control had always been limited. Moreover, the experts of the clan were a special resource. They couldn't be casually lent to others like gold or silver. On the contrary, if they met someone with talent and outstanding strength, the various aristocratic families would actively recruit them into their family. How could they possibly lend their experts to others? From the very start, it was very unlikely that anyone would agree to Wang Chong's request. Isn't it just 20 true martial realm tier 4 or 5 guards? I'll borrow 40 of them. Suddenly, just as everyone was trying to find excuses to shirk responsibility, a thunderous roar suddenly entered everyone's ears. In an instant, the entire hall quietened down. Everyone was looking at the straightforward and forthright young man from an aristocratic family. I was wondering who it was. So it's Wei Hao. You and Wang Chong are childhood friends, grew up together, and are brothers who wear the same pants. Of course you'll lend them to him. However, an eccentric voice quickly sounded from the crowd. It was filled with sarcasm. But Wei Hao, I just want to ask you something. You casually asked for 40 true martial realm experts, but do you have them yourself? If I remember correctly, you still have big brother and second brother, right? Have you asked your big brother, second brother, and your father, the Duke of Wei? Chapter 478. Su-bai sent you here, right? Bastard, since he sent you here, he shouldn't be too far away. Su-bai, you bastard, get out here. Wei Hao harumphed angrily as he swept his vicious gaze across the crowd. He had no need to be polite to Su-bai. Since this fellow dared to send someone here to cause trouble, he shouldn't blame him for being impolite. Don't spout nonsense here. Our Gongzi didn't even come here. Besides, the one who invited us is your brother, Wang Chong. What does it have to do with us? The guard from the Duke Su public house sneered and said rudely. The order he received was to disrupt Wang Chong's operation as much as possible. No matter what he did, he couldn't be allowed to succeed. However, even if he didn't know, Duke Su's original intention was for him to take a look and interact with Wang Chong to understand what was going on. However, it was a pity that Su-bai's selfishness got the better of him. He changed the order to disrupt Wang Chong's operation, regardless of the cost. Wang Chong, Su-bai must be up to no good by sending this bastard here. Say the word and I'll chase him out for you. Wei Hao angrily squeezed his way through the crowd and rushed to Wang Chong's side. He and Wang Chong had grown up together, so he knew everything in the Wang residence like the back of his hand. However, Wei Hao was still able to distinguish the occasion. This gathering was initiated by Wang Chong. In such a formal occasion, regardless of whether the other party was welcome or here to cause trouble, only Wang Chong could make the decision. Enough. Wang Chong chuckled lightly as he pulled the furious Wei Hao aside. Calm down, I was the one who invited Duke Su's man. What? Wei Hao, who was still fuming a moment ago, was dumbfounded when he heard those words. He had always thought that Su-bai sent someone here to cause trouble. He didn't expect that it was actually Wang Chong who invited him here. Haven't you always been at odds with him? Why did you invite him over? Wei Hao had a look of disbelief on his face. He had not expected the truth to be like this. Hee, I'll tell you later. Wang Chong said with a smile, but he didn't say anything. The matter in the southwest was a national grudge, but the matter between him and Su-bai, the matter between the Wang clan and the Su clan, was a personal grudge. Compared to what was about to happen in the southwest, what did personal grudges count for? As long as it could be beneficial to what he was about to do, as long as it could help this empire that was in a precarious situation and facing a huge crisis, as well as the millions of people living on this land, everything else was not important to Wang Chong. Humph, Wang Chong, don't bother with this bastard. Isn't it just a dozen or so true martial realm experts? Our Bai family may not have much, but we do have a lot of these experts. All of a sudden, a voice sounded from the crowd, and Bai Siling walked out of the crowd on her tiptoes. Her slender neck was raised high, and she exuded the allure of a young lady. As she walked toward Wang Chong, she even winked at Wang Chong a few times, seemingly carrying a deeper meaning. We were going to look for you. But it just so happens that you were sleeping. Furthermore, Bai Siling said that if you were to bring so many people with you, there would definitely be people who would cause trouble. So, she told us not to rush to meet them and to sneak over here first. Wei Hao approached Wang Chong and whispered. Even though he rarely stayed in the training camp, he had more or less seen the faces of the people around Wang Chong. He knew of the Bai clan's intelligent and crafty Bai Siling. Hee, if Wang Gongzi needs something, count our Su clan in as well. On the other side, Su Gan cooperated with Bai Siling and walked out of the crowd. He wasn't as high profile as Bai Siling, but he only needed to cooperate from the side. Count us in as well. A fiery cloud flashed by. Zhao Yadong, dressed in red and with a red dot on her forehead, was a bewitching beauty. She lost no time in walking out of the crowd. Buzz! Be it the Su clan or the Zhao clan, both of them were influential clans in the capital. Not to mention, Bai Siling's Bai clan was one of the oldest clans in the capital, and in terms of influence, it was on par with the Wang clan. The crowd buzzed with activity as these three clans stepped forward. It was clear that none of them had expected this. great clans always had their reasons for doing things. If it wasn't beneficial, they would never do something like this. For many clans, when they were hesitating, they only needed to look at the actions of the most influential clans. Without a doubt, the appearance of Bai Xiling, Zhao Yadong, and Su Gan, as well as their powerful support, had a major impact on the crowd. Some of the smaller clans were also moved. Wait a moment. If I'm not wrong. Bai Xiling, Zhao Yadong, Su Gan, all of you are Wang Chang's friends. If you want to help him, there's no problem. But we don't need it. The Duke of Su's bodyguard hurriedly shouted, furthermore, those who can appear here, which family isn't extremely wealthy? And many of those experts were personally raised by us with great effort. There are also some that we hired from outside at a high price. If we give them to you, wouldn't that be helping our Wang clan make a wedding dress? I know that you, Wang Chong, sold the spirit vein for money, but no matter how much you pay, we won't sell it. The Duke Su's protector said with an unperturbed expression. With his interference, many people in the hall once more began to hesitate. The status and identity of a great clan was extraordinary, and they played a decisive role among the great clans of the capital. However, if Bai Xiling, Zhao Yadong, and Su Gan were Wang Chang's good friends, then this matter was naturally a different matter. In the end, what Wang Chong was borrowing from them was not pots and pans, gold, silver, or other treasures. For many clans, top-class experts were related to their clan's resources and could not be easily lent out. Damn it, how does this fellow know Bai Xiling, Zhao Yadong, and Su Gan? Wei Hao cursed in his heart. This fellow seemed to have steeled his heart to make trouble. Ha, who said I was buying with gold and silver? Wang Chong indifferently said. Is that not the case? The guards of Duke Su's public house immediately responded with tit for tat and mocked back. Gold and silver. Treasures. To the other great clans, these things were not very attractive. As for status, the Wang clan could not provide it. Wang Chong only faintly smiled, not arguing with him. His gaze turned to the people from the various clans in the hall. First of all, I thank everyone for coming. Then, I didn't say it in the letter because words alone have no basis. If you don't hear it from my own mouth, I trust that none of you will have much confidence in the following transaction. Wang Chong paused for a moment, his expression calm and unhurried, exuding an infectious air. There's no free lunch in this world. Since I'm asking the various clans for help, I naturally can't be borrowing it for free. So, everyone can decide for yourselves. I need everyone present to lend me the strongest guards of your clans. The requirement is that they must be at least tier 4 or 5 of the true martial realm. I only need them for 3 months. During this period of 3 months, everyone must listen to my commands. And after 3 months, these guards will naturally return to your clans. And as for the price. Wang Chong paused, and for a moment, the hall was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone's eyes were focused on Wang Chong. Even the Duke Su residence guard who had been making trouble this entire time was holding his breath, a look of concern on his face. Wang Chong had just clearly denied that he would spend money to borrow true martial realm experts from the various clans, but what everyone present was curious about was how Wang Chong was able to get them to agree to the transfer of experts from their clans if it wasn't for money. Given the status of the great clans in the capital, there truly weren't many things that could attract them. A Wuzi steel weapon. Under the expectant gazes of the crowd, Wang Chong slowly extended a finger. For 3 months, for every true martial tier 4 or 5 martial artist that is transferred, you can obtain a Wuzi steel weapon from me. Once these 3 months are over, whether or not I've completed my task, you will obtain a Wuzi steel weapon from me. And of course, there will also be the guards of your residence. Buzz. The moment Wang Chong finished speaking, the hall fell silent for a long time. Wang Chong, you've gone mad. The first to react was Wei Hao, his eyes wide as he stared in disbelief at Wang Chong. No. It wasn't just disbelief, it was complete panic. How can we give them a woozy steel weapon? And for 3 months at that? Take back what you just said. That's right, Wang Chong. Woozy steel weapons are currently priceless. You can't buy them even if you want to. If you need some top-class experts, we can think of a way to help you. There's no need to do this. Bai Xiling was also stunned. Not even she had expected that Wang Chong had gathered so many people just to propose this sort of deal. The woozy steel sword was decisive, and it was said to be the king of weapons. Not even Wang Chong himself had many of these things. Xiling is right. Wang Chong, do you want to reconsider? Su Gan also agreed. From his perspective, no matter how he looked at it, Wang Chong was at a great disadvantage. This sort of deal was simply insane. Wang Chong, if you need help, I can also help. Our Zhao clan is a military clan, and we've probably been involved in the military for even longer than your Wang clan. In this aspect, our Zhao clan can provide assistance. There's no need for you to ask them for help. Zhao Yudong walked up to Wang Chong's side. No. Before Wang Chong could reply, someone below the stage grew anxious. The Wang clan is still a clan of ministers and generals. Words spoken cannot be taken back. Since you've already made a promise, you cannot go back on it. As soon as the voice fell, a somewhat arrogant figure squeezed through the crowd and walked out. It was not the guard from the Duke of Su's residence, but someone else. Bastard! Su Bai, it's you. Chapter 479. Wei Hao, do you think that I'm afraid of you? You want to challenge me? You're asking for trouble. Su Bai had been hiding in the crowd for a long time. Seeing Wei Hao charging at him, he wasn't afraid at all. Brat, even if I can't deal with Wang Chong openly, do you think I can't deal with you? A vicious glint flashed across Su Bai's eyes. What kind of person was Wei Hao? He was the butt of their jokes, a toy that they toyed with in the Eight Gods Pavilion. Su Bai had never feared Wei Hao. Furthermore, he had been suppressed by Wang Chong in every aspect, and he had been suppressing his anger for a long time. Boom! Su Bai pushed his palm forward, and his entire body suddenly flushed red. A metallic clang sounded from the depths of his dantian, and a majestic energy burst forth. It wasn't the energy of an origin energy realm cultivator, but the stellar energy of a true martial realm cultivator. Even though he seemed ignorant, Su Bai had long reached the true martial realm. As one of the nobles of the empire, how could Su Bai possibly be ignorant and incompetent? Wei Hao, I'll let you suffer a little this time. A vicious glint flashed across Su Bai's eyes, and he seemed to be roaring his last sentence. But in the next instant, boom! A tremendous force, accompanied by a metallic clang, smashed into Su Bai's fist with the force of a landslide and a tsunami. In just a single strike, Su Bai felt as though he had been struck by a mountain, and he was sent flying like a broken kite. Boom! In a straight line behind Su Bai, 7 or 8 people were sent sprawling on the ground along with Su Bai. Ah! Su Bai, you bastard! Are you blind? What are you two doing? Are you fighting here? The originally orderly lobby was instantly thrown into chaos. The aristocratic families that had been brought down by Su Bai couldn't help but curse out loud. Wang Chong, why aren't you reigning in Wei Hao? Su Bai sat on the floor, both shocked and furious. He was shocked that Wei Hao was so formidable, and he was furious that he had embarrassed himself in front of so many people. All right, Wei Hao, that's enough. Wang Chong laughed in his heart. As soon as Wei Hao entered, he could feel that his strength had increased tremendously. The mountain ascension formula was a top-notch technique from back then. It would be a wonder if Su Bai could defeat it. However, the reason why he pulled Su Bai over wasn't to humiliate him or exact vengeance. Compared to what he had to do, these were really not worth mentioning. Su Bai, weren't you talking big? What about his ability? Ha, for the sake of Wang Chong, I'll let you off this time. But it won't be as good again. Wei Hao said bluntly. Since Wang Chong had spoken, of course, he couldn't attack again. However, he could still humiliate him verbally to satisfy his craving. Su Bai's face alternated between green and purple. Surprisingly, even after suffering such humiliation, he didn't leave the banquet in anger. Wang Chong, do you mean what you said? Is the matter of borrowing a real martial realm expert for 3 months in exchange for a Wuzi steel sword still valid? Su Bai glared at Wang Chong said. In the first place, he had never intended to show his face on this trip. On the surface, he had agreed to the old master's request, but in reality, he had done something else entirely. He wanted Wang Chong to make a fool of himself. However, he couldn't ignore this matter anymore. The Wuzi steel sword was a top-notch weapon. Not only was it beautiful, it was also extremely hard to destroy. At the same time, it was indestructible and sharp. There was almost no sword in the capital that could compare to it. Thus, even though every Wuzi steel sword was incomparably expensive, it had always been priceless. More importantly, the Duke of Su had once tried to purchase a Wuzi steel sword, but in the end, they discovered that the Wuzi steel sword was only circulated in the depths of the palace and couldn't be bought outside. In the past, with the Duke of Su's status, he could easily obtain any information or item he wanted from the imperial guards there. However, the situation this time was different. In the past, the imperial guards were very respectful towards the dukes of the empire, but this time, their attitude towards the Wuzi steel sword was completely different. Once a Wuzi steel sword was auctioned, no one would easily take it out. Since the first Wuzi steel sword was auctioned until now, the number of Wuzi steel weapons that appeared outside of the imperial guards could be counted on one's fingers. Thus, to the majority of the aristocratic families, this item was still something that could only be looked up to and not played with. It was something that could only be encountered but not sought. More importantly, the aristocratic families in the capital more or less had some treasured swords that were passed down from generation to generation. And the sharpness of the Wuzi steel sword was far superior to their heirloom swords. Its value was naturally immeasurable. Martial artists had a lifespan, but there was no limit to the inheritance of swords and sabers. This was where the value of the Wuzi steel sword lay. If one were to borrow a true martial realm tier 4 or 5 expert, in just 3 months, one would be able to exchange for an indestructible Wuzi steel sword. No matter how one looked at it, this was a huge bargain. That's right, Wang Gongzi, you can't possibly go back on your words. Even the aristocratic families have to maintain their dignity. Gongzi won't disregard the Wang clan's dignity just for a Wuzi steel sword, right? 5 true martial realm experts, no problem. Wang Gongzi, you can't go back on your words. That's right. That's right. In an instant, the crowd echoed in agreement. Their attitude was completely different from that of the Prime Minister. The conditions offered by the Wang clan were simply irresistible. No one could have imagined that they would be so generous. Wait a moment, Wang Chong, don't agree to them. Seeing Wang Chong making such a promise, Bai Siling panicked. Siling, it's fine. With a smile, Wang Chong waved his hands to appease Bai Siling. Then, he turned to the crowd in the hall. Our Wang clan's words are naturally true to our words. However, I'll make it clear here. In the end, I only have 1,000 wood steel weapons here. If you miss this opportunity, I won't be able to give them to you even if I wanted to. Thus, I'll stop at the limit of 1,000 true martial realm experts. Whether you can obtain the Wuzi steel weapons or not will depend on yourselves. Boom. The moment Wang Chong finished his words, boom, as though a boulder had fallen, everyone in the hall rushed out in a frenzy. When the interests of the clan were at stake, no one dared to fall behind. Su Bai, wait a moment. Wang Chong suddenly shouted. In the crowd, Su Bai, who had already rushed out 7 to 8 zhang away, trembled upon hearing those words. He slowly turned around with an awful expression. Wang Chong, don't tell me you're thinking of going back on your word. It was true that he wanted to cause trouble, but he was no fool. Lending 10 top-notch experts in exchange for 10 Wuzi steel swords was a good thing that could strengthen the clan's foundation and influence the Duke Su residence's strength. Only a fool would not do such a thing. In comparison, the rift between him and Wang Chong was insignificant. If Wang Chong suddenly wanted to go back on his word, he would be dead meat. Ha! I won't go back on my word. Wang Chong flicked his sleeves and smiled calmly. But I'm sure you understand the relationship between us. So, Su Bai, don't think about sending a few people over. With the Wuzi steel swords, they can lurk around me and cause trouble. For others, I don't have too many requests. But for you, don't send your Su clan's confidants. Don't send anyone below the 6th rank of the martial path. Also, I know that your Su clan has recruited a new batch of experts. It should be less than 2 months ago. This amount of time isn't enough for you to completely tame them, right? If you want to get the Wuzi steel swords, you should know what to do, right? Wang Chong said calmly. Su Bai's expression froze, his face alternating between green and white. Wang Chong was right, he did have such a plan. No matter what Wang Chong wanted to do, as long as he sent a few of the Su clan's confidants in, he would be able to get the world's sharpest, Wuzi steel swords. He would also be able to understand Wang Chong's movements and secrets. If necessary, he could even stab Wang Chong in the back. If something really happened, he could just say that he didn't know anything. At most, he could just abandon the pawn to protect the carriage and push the blame to the guards. But he didn't expect that Wang Chong had already prepared for this move. And he even knew that the Su clan had recruited a new batch of experts. Wang Chong, don't get too cocky. There will be a day when you'll regret it. Although Wang Chong had seen through his plans, Su Bai wasn't willing to lose. With a cold snort, he threw down these words and swiftly left. This matter involving the Wuzi steel swords was no small matter. He had to go back and tell his father as quickly as possible. Wang Chong, why did you recruit so many people? And you even want to use Wuzi steel swords to trade for them? Once the people in the hall had left, Zhao Yadong took 2 steps forward and finally couldn't help but ask. Does it have to do with the Southwest? It was Bai Siling who saw the first signs and stepped forward to ask. Wang Chong said nothing, only glanced at Bai Siling and then firmly nodded. The Wang clan was going to take out 1,000 top-class Wuzi steel swords to borrow experts from the great clans of the capital. The news of what had happened in the hall was quickly spread by those who had left the Wang clan residence. The entire capital was in an uproar. Damn it! I knew I should have gone. It's over, it's over. All of you were the ones who talked too much. This was a chance that was delivered to our doorstep, but we threw it away. Hurry. Do you know how much effort Patriarch Wang had to put in to obtain the Wuzi steel swords of the imperial court? Now that the Wuzi steel swords have been delivered to us, we can't miss it. I don't care why the Wang clan wants to borrow experts from our clans. Even if we die outside, we have to get those weapons. Hurry and gather the experts of the clan. In addition, get ready. I'm going to the Wang clan to pay a visit to that young Master Wang. No matter what, we have to get those spots. The great clans of the capital were in an uproar, all of them regretting their previous decisions. The Southwest was currently attracting the attention of the entire capital, but it was still too far away. In comparison, the matter of this young Master Wang was closely related to the interests of their clans. Countless great clans immediately began to move. Chapter 480. 400,000 taels of gold to buy out 3 months' worth of production from your jade slicing sword shop. This is the blueprint. Forge according to it. No mistakes are allowed. Amidst the galloping of the warhorses, a heavy money bag streaked across the air, swept past the gate of the jade-cutting sword tower, and fell heavily in the lobby. The heavy bag struck the ground, causing the entire building to tremble. 400,000 taels. In a flash, one figure after another emerged from the building and stared in shock at the heavy bag of money on the ground. Jade Slicing Pavilion, Jade Steel Pavilion, Gold Rending Pavilion, all the famous sword shops and smiths of the capital had received the generous reward that Wang Chong had given ahead of time. Whether it was sword shops or smiths, the monthly profit they made was extremely limited, unlike Wang Chong, who could casually sell a sword for tens of thousands of taels, hundreds of thousands of taels, or even hundreds of thousands of taels of gold. In truth, in the entire capital, probably only Wang Chong could do this. 400,000 taels of gold was already far more than these top-class sword shops and smiths could make in a year. The swordsmiths and smiths had been somewhat hesitant, but now that they received the gold that Wang Chong had sent someone to give them, how could they still hesitate? In a short amount of time, all the sword shops and smiths of the capital had made their decision. In almost a single day, Wang Chong had obtained the right to forge all the sword shops and smiths of the capital. Starting from now, for the next 3 months, all the sword shops and smiths of the capital would belong to Wang Chong. All the sword shops and smiths would only forge items for Wang Chong, serving him alone, belonging to him alone. This sort of situation had never happened before, but now, it had become a reality. Rumble. Like a massive machine, with Wang Chong throwing out large amounts of gold and using Wuzi steel swords to open a path, the entire capital began to rumble around Wang Chong and the Wang clan. Thick smoke rose from various parts of the capital. For the first time, all the sword shops and smiths closed their doors and refused customers, gathering together to forge weapons for a single person. The various aristocratic families in the capital also sent their experts to the Wang family. Wang Chong left these experts to Li Sai, Wei Anfang, and Zhao Jingdian. From the expert guards of the aristocratic families to the troops that could be mobilized on the battlefield, it was not enough to just be skilled in martial arts. One had to go through strict training as well. However, compared to hired experts, the experts and bodyguards of the aristocratic families all had some foundation in the military. This was also the reason why Wang Chong had gathered the bodyguards of the aristocratic families first. Everything is on the right track. All that's left is me. As Wang Chong stood on the roof of a tall building, his robes flapping in the wind, he could see rows upon rows of buildings in the capital. Wisps of smoke rose into the air, and tinkling could be heard from every direction. In the distance, warhorses neighed. In his days, Wang Chong felt like he was on the distant Deflecting Blade Mountain. Under the command of Li Sai and Zhao Jingdian, hundreds of bodyguards were galloping through the mountains, busily training. War had always been a massive expenditure. Whether it was manpower, food, or war equipment, ordinary clans could not afford any of these. Whether it was the Wuzi steel swords or the enormous wealth he had gained from selling the spirit vein, Wang Chong had invested all of it into this endeavor. The machinery was already in motion, and Wang Chong was well aware that what awaited him now was a desperate battle. In this battle, it was not just the soldiers who needed to prepare, but himself as well. With a thought, Wang Chong communicated with the Stone of Destiny in his mind. Last time, when he dealt with an Yikangshen and killed Ashina, he had obtained 200 points of destiny energy. In Shir, he had obtained 200 points of destiny energy. Adding on the Yuzhou soldiers he had killed and the destiny energy he had accumulated, he now had a total of 269 points. He could have saved these destiny energy for the next level of the Stone of Destiny and exchanged them for even greater rewards, but the war in the southwest was imminent, and there was no time for that. Only by exchanging for them now would they be of use in the war. Moreover, although the rewards of the first level were not as impressive as the rewards of the next level, Wang Chong knew that one of the rewards would be of the greatest help to him. Stone of Destiny, exchange for 3 layers of destiny penetration. This thought was transmitted to Wang Chong's mind. A moment later, there was a rumble as his mind brightened and golden light surged. 3 bolts of stellar energy penetration descended from the Stone of Destiny, bursting into Wang Chang's limbs and bones like lightning and rushing into his dantian. Bzzzt. Wang Chang's already powerful aura rapidly grew, and the effect of the 1 layer of stellar energy penetration rose to 4, while the probability of activating stellar energy penetration rose from 5% to 20%. Every 5 attacks, there would be a penetration effect. And after exchanging for 3 layers of stellar energy penetration, Wang Chang's strength rose along with it, rising from Tier 3 of the true martial realm to nearing Tier 4 of the true martial realm. Now, there's only one last step left. With a thought, Wang Chong opened his eyes and looked at the 4 pills in his hand. These pills were all accumulated from 6-fingered Zhang's pills. As the saying went, money makes the mare turn the millstone. Wang Chong had sold the spirit vein and accumulated a great deal of wealth. At the same time, his position in the heart of the court alchemist had greatly increased. This time, it was the court alchemist who had sought out Wang Chong and raised his qualifications. The number of pills that could be exchanged for each month had increased by 1. Gulp. Wang Chong raised his head and swallowed the 4 pills in succession. In an instant, a stream of fire exploded in Wang Chang's body. A moment later, when the medicinal power of the pills had been exhausted, Wang Chong had successfully broken through to Tier 4 of the true martial realm. Rumble. Thunder rumbled. His gaze moved away from the capital and toward the distant west. What he saw was a vast and majestic city towering over the vast land. Black clouds covered the sky above the city, silver snakes shuttling through the clouds. Opposite the city was a protruding piece of land that reached into the clouds. Like a massive wave, it gave off the feeling that it could crash down at any moment and turn everything into ashes. That was the Uzan Plateau. In the distant Longxi, the threat from another continent and another empire could be sensed more clearly than any other region in the Central Plains. Although they were neighbors, to the Central Plains, that protruding plateau seemed to come from another world. On that high grassland, countless warriors were nurtured. Even though the dynasties of the Central Plains had defeated them time and time again, they had never been able to completely crush them. The lofty sea level difference formed an invisible and firm barrier that made it difficult for the empires of the Central Plains to exert their strength. Time and time again, the cavalry of the plateau would form groups and charge into the Central Plains, killing and pillaging, only to retreat back to the Uzan Plateau before the main army arrived. To the people of the Uzan Plateau, the Central Plains was a defenseless land. That was, until that city was built and that person appeared. Big Dipper City. Gashu Han. In the distant lands of the west, this newly constructed city was like a massive nail hammered into the map of the empire's western border. It became the anchor of Longxi, an existence that countered the cavalry of the Yusang Empire. And the great general Gashu Han, who had risen to prominence like a comet, swept through the western provinces and became the most feared existence of the Uzan Empire. The Big Dipper is high in the sky, and Gashu Han carries his saber at night. To this day, he spies on his horse, but dares not cross Lintao. This folk song was not only heard in Longxi, but also in the distant Uzan Plateau. And it was precisely because of Gashu Han's existence and Big Dipper City's establishment that the wise saying, of all the riches in the world, none surpass Longyu. Nay. Thunder rumbled and dark clouds hung low. All of a sudden, the fierce neigh of a warhorse pierced through the clouds, coming from the summit of the continent. The warhorse galloped. In just a moment, an iron-blooded, murderous black figure immediately appeared at the top of the continent. Behind the black figure was a large flag fluttering in the wind. Enemy attack. Almost at the same time that the figure appeared, a Big Dipper army sentry on the walls of Big Dipper City let out a shrill cry. They had been stationed on the borders of Longxi for many years, so they were extremely familiar with the Uzan Empire's cavalry. The heaviness of the heavy plate armor even seeped into their figures, and could be seen from far away. But this wasn't the reason for his nervousness. Ever since the great general had established Big Dipper City, the Uzun Empire had suffered successive defeats. It had been a long time since they had dared to openly appear before Big Dipper City. This was definitely not an ordinary situation. Rumble. Almost at the same time that the sentry's warning sounded, the entire Big Dipper City began to tremble. Tens of thousands of soldiers surged out of the city and swiftly assembled into battle formations. Even though there were so many of them, there was no panic in Big Dipper City. Even as they rushed to their posts, they strictly obeyed some sort of order. In the span of just a few breaths, the bustling Big Dipper City had suddenly quieted down. All the soldiers took their positions, and a solemn aura emanated from the formation and enveloped the earth. The entire city was so quiet that it seemed like an empty city. Big Dipper's long years of training were on full display at this moment. From the very beginning, they had entered a state of daily combat readiness, and in the span of a few breaths, they had swiftly arrived at the city. But even though the city was growing quieter and quieter, the commotion outside the city was growing louder and louder. Rumble. A massive sound came from another towering continent like a tsunami. At first, it was barely audible, but gradually, it grew louder and louder. When it got closer, everyone could clearly hear that it was the clattering of tens of thousands of hooves and the clattering of metal. It's the Uzun Empire's army. The expressions of the Big Dipper soldiers on the city walls changed one after another. Having presided over Longxi for so many years, they were already used to fighting with the Uzun Empire. But this battle was clearly different. Listening to the intense clattering of hooves, the army that had appeared at the border of the Uzun highlands was in the tens of thousands, far surpassing the level of the previous battles. The sound of the earth quaking indicated that there were at least 100,000 soldiers fighting. Look over there. Suddenly, someone pointed into the distance and shouted. Whoosh! Strong winds blew. Under the gazes of countless people, a huge flagpole, at least 100 feet long, suddenly rose from the top of that towering continent in the distance. On the flagpole, a huge blood-soaked war flag fluttered in the wind, fluttering in the wind. On the blood-red flag, there was a huge three-headed white lion bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws. Even from a distance, it could be seen clearly. The three-headed white lion flag. It's Witadra Konglo. Chapter 481. Not many people overseeing the Longxi border had seen it, but there was almost no one who did not know of it. This was because it represented a legendary existence of the Uzun Empire. The number one king of generals under the Tsenpo, the war god of the Uzun Empire, Witadra Konglo. In the Uzun Empire, this person had a far higher status than the great generals of Huishu Wuzong and Dusong Mangpoj. His status was equivalent to the junior guardian of the Tang dynasty, the crown prince, Wang Zhongxi, who was hailed as the war god of the Tang dynasty. In the past, Wang Zhongxi had swept through Shillong, almost fighting his way up to the Uzun Plateau and threatening the capital of the Uzun Empire. In the end, he had failed because he had run into Witadra Konglo. In the entire Uzun Empire, the only person who could faintly contend against the war god Wang Zhongxi was Witadra Konglo. It was said that this person was a divine commander, but ever since that war, Witadra Konglo had never appeared again. No one had expected that this legendary expert of the Uzun Empire would appear at a time like this. In a flash, all the soldiers of the Big Dipper army looked in the same direction. The shadow of a tree, the name of a man. This legendary number one king of generals of the Uzun Empire was far too famous, and the pressure it exerted was far too great. If there was one person in all of Big Dipper City that could contend against him, it was the great general. For a moment, everyone's eyes fell on the top floor of Big Dipper City, on that majestic figure that had appeared at some point. The Big Dipper was high, and Geshu carried a blade. No matter when, the name of the Big Dipper Great General Geshu Han was in existence that could stabilize the western border. Witadra Konglo, Geshu Han stood on top of the towering city gate tower, his entire body exuding an aura as heavy as a mountain, as tempered as steel and iron. As an imperial great general, Geshu Han had a rare handsomeness and an oppressive aura. His long and narrow eyes shone like the sun and moon, the opening and closing of yin and yang. Although he was not angry, he exuded a dignified and awe-inspiring majesty. As a former subordinate of the Tang dynasty war god Wang Zhongxi, Geshu Han had experienced many things, including the battle between the Uzun White Lion Great General Weitadra Konglo and Wang Zhongxi. After the battle, Yu Sang had suffered heavy losses, and Wang Zhongxi, affected by the terrain of the plateau and the resistance of Weitadra Konglo, withdrew from the Tibetan plateau. Geshu Han had personally participated in the Great General's War, but Great General Lion War. Only Geshu Han knew that the reason Weitadra Konglo did not invade the Central Plains again was not because Weitadra was benevolent, but because Weitadra Konglo had suffered heavy injuries in that war and had no choice but to retreat. However, after so many years, his injuries should have more or less healed. When there's an abnormality, there must be a monster. It's been a very long time since Yu Sang and the Great Tang have fought. For Weitadra Konglo to suddenly appear here, just what does he want? Geshu Han stood motionlessly on the city walls, his black armor and long hair fluttering in the wind. After experiencing countless battles, there were very few things that could stir his emotions. But at this moment, Geshu Han felt a little uneasy. It was not because of Weitadra Konglo, but because the Uzun Empire's actions were too abnormal. Weitadra Konglo was known as the White Lion Great General, the #1 Great General of the Uzun Empire, and his offensive prowess was so great that even the Tang dynasty war god Wang Zhongxi couldn't deal with him at his peak. But Geshu Han's goal was not to conquer Uzun. Fighting in the wilderness and defending a city were two completely different matters. No matter how fierce and valiant the Uzun cavalry were, as long as the Big Dipper army did not fight in the wilderness, the White Lion Great General Weitadra Konglo wouldn't be able to do anything. After so many years, the Big Dipper army had killed tens of thousands of Uzun cavalry. It could be said that in the entire Tang dynasty, if there was a single army that understood the Uzun the most and could best counter them, it would definitely be Geshu Han's Big Dipper army. An army tempered by iron, blood, and fire was enough to hold its own against any storm. It wasn't something that could be easily wiped out by sheer numbers. Geshu Han was confident that the Uzun would understand such a simple principle. Weitadra Konglo would never do anything without a goal. If not for the White Lion Great General's extraordinary intelligence, he wouldn't have been able to block Wang Zhongxi's attack. As Geshu Han stood on the city walls, his mind was in turmoil, countless thoughts flashing through his mind. The situation in the empire, including that of Longxi, flew through his mind. Lin Tao was on the edge of Longxi, and with Big Dipper City there, the Uzun basically had no hope. Gao Xianji was presiding over Suiye in the northwest. With Feng Changqing's assistance and the two twin paragons of the empire, one civil and one military, even if the White Lion Great General personally led the charge, there wouldn't be any surprises. As for Qixi, Foman Linta was also presiding over it. This was a veteran general through and through. Back when he was presiding over the western regions, he had fought many battles with the Uzun. He had even stopped the Arab assault, so how could the Uzun do it? In truth, if one looked down from the sky, they would discover that from Suiye at the end of the western regions to Qixi, and then to Longxi, the entire border of the Uzun Plateau was surrounded by the three Tang dynasty protectorates, forming an iron wall that firmly locked the Uzun to the plateau. Meanwhile, Ensishuan's biting protectorate was intimidating the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, and with its massive army, it could reinforce the three armies and the three protectorates at any time. It was impossible for the Tibetans to catch up in this direction, unless, Jianga in the southwest. A bolt of lightning flashed through Geshu Han's mind, and his body trembled as if he suddenly understood something, his face turning unsightly. The only place in the entire Central Plains that could give the Uzun a chance was Jianga in the southwest. It was no secret that Xianyu Zhongtong had led 180,000 Tang dynasty elites on an expedition but had been defeated by Jelifeng. But Geshu Han had always believed that even if Xianyu Zhongtong was defeated, he would only suffer some minor losses. Given the Tang army's strength, as long as they could stand firm and rely on their own strength and reinforcements, they were completely capable of defeating Jelifang. But at this moment, Geshu Han had an extremely ill foreboding. Boom! Boom! While Geshu Han's brows were rising in unease, the deep and desolate sound of a bull horn came from the distant plateau. Next to the blood-red banner of the three-headed white lion, a smaller black banner was raised by 10 some figures. On this black banner was a striking image of a writhing black yak. The two banners, one red and one black, one large and one small, stood side by side. Even Geshu Han's expression flickered at the sight of those two war banners. Anyone who had ever lived in Longxi would be familiar with this banner. It was the banner of the Uzun Great General, Dusong Mangpoj. Two of the Uzun Great Generals had appeared on the border of the Uzun continent, simultaneously threatening the Longxi territory of the Tang dynasty. At this moment, even Geshu Han felt a heavy pressure. In any empire, a general-level figure would play a decisive role. These imperial great generals rarely appeared. But for two Uzun Great Generals to appear at the same time and attack Big Dipper City was an unprecedented situation. At this moment, not just Geshu Han, but all the officers and soldiers of the Big Dipper army also felt a heavy pressure. Two Uzun Great Generals working together was a completely different matter. Rumble. After a brief moment of silence, thousands of Uzun cavalry poured down from the distant Uzun plateau like dumplings into a pot, sweeping toward Big Dipper City with a momentum that could topple mountains and overturn seas. The atmosphere between the heavens and the earth suddenly became extremely tense. Boom! On the top of the watchtower, Geshu Han suddenly stepped forward, his handsome and imposing face exuding a cold and somber aura. Everyone, hear my order. All soldiers, stand ready. Geshu Han's right hand pressed down on his saber, and a storm of energy soared into the sky. At almost the same time, the 60,000 elites of the Big Dipper army roared, exploding with a steely and murderous aura that soared into the sky. The battle had finally begun. The long-vanished great general king of the Uzun Empire, Witadra Konglo, had joined forces with Dusong Mangpoj to attack Big Dipper City in Lintao. This news shook the entire capital. But even more shocking was the news from the empire's southwest. Xianyu Zhongtong had been defeated. The 180,000 soldiers had suffered a crushing defeat under the pincer attack of Mengshi Zhao and Uzun. More than half of the 180,000 elites had been killed or injured, and even Li Zhengyi and the 60,000 soldiers sent to reinforce Xianyu Zhongtong had been intercepted by Uzun. Chapter 482. The news had come out a few days ago. A scout at Li Zhengyi's side had charged into the capital, his body covered in blood. After being carried to the Bureau of Military Personnel, he had only been able to hand over his token and send a message requesting reinforcements before falling unconscious. If the Uzun's attack on the border of Longxi was a large-scale invasion of the Tang dynasty, then the grievous news of the 180,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty from Jiang'e in the southwest was a world-shattering shock. No one had expected this result. The assault of the Uzun had thrown everyone into panic. The Uzun are declaring war on the Tang dynasty. This is a complete rupture. In the imperial court, an imperial censor shouted with all his might. Even his face was red, and his extreme anger caused his body to tremble. They've already broken off. In Longxi in the southwest, the Uzun have launched a large-scale attack on the Tang dynasty, mobilizing hundreds of thousands of soldiers. If this isn't a rupture, what is? What we need to discuss now is what to do. Li Zhengyi has already been defeated, so how can we still have soldiers? If we want to help Xianyu Zhongtong and Li Zhengyi, the Big Dipper army is the best way. But the Big Dipper army is already being held down by Witadra Konglo and Dusong Mangpoj. Lord Wang said long ago that now was not the time to send troops, but none of you listened. Now you understand. What I'm worried about isn't this, but the hundreds of thousands of civilians in the southwest. If the 180,000 Tang dynasty elites of the Annan Protectorate can't stop them, the southwest will be a flat plain. Who can stop the combined army of Mengshi Zhao and Uzun? Bzzz. It was like all the air had been sucked out, and the noisy hall instantly fell silent. All the nobles, ministers, and imperial censors fell silent. A stifling energy shrouded the entire imperial court. The defeat in the southwest had never been the most worrisome. What truly worried them were the nearly 1 million civilians of the southwest. As the barrier of the southwest, the Annan Protectorate was the first and last barrier against Mengshi Zhao and Uzun. For this reason, the army of the Annan Protectorate had always been very large. Its 180,000 elites far surpassed Geshu Han's Big Dipper army and Anshi's Gao Xianji's army. Not even Zhang Shogui of the Annong Protectorate had 180,000 soldiers. This was the reason why Zhangqiu Jianqiong had always been cautious when he was stationed in the southwest, never daring to launch an attack recklessly. However, Zhelifeng's sudden assault, as well as the pressure that Zhangqiu Jianqiong had to face after becoming the Minister of War, caused all of this to go up in smoke. The new wave of reinforcements from the imperial court would need at least 2 months to regroup. Whether it was from other directions, from the protectorates, or from a temporary organization, it had to be done. But before that, the nearly 1 million people of the southwest would have no protection. When they thought about the consequences of the sudden advance of Mengshi Zhao and Uzun's armies, all the ministers couldn't help but tremble. Wang Chong, as he looked at the solemn and speechless ministers, the king of Song suddenly thought of a certain person. No one had expected the 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty's protectorate of the southwest to fall to such a state. If there was one person in all of society who had known that all of this would develop to this point, there was no question that this person was Wang Chong. For some reason, the king of Song felt that Wang Chong had long ago known that all of this would develop to this point. This made him feel very strange. Perhaps, this child has some kind of plan. The king of Song raised his head and looked up at the ceiling of the coiling dragon hall as he quietly said to himself. While the imperial court of the Central Plains was reeling from the defeat in the southwest, the north and northeast of the Tang dynasty were equally restless. Ha ha ha, this is an opportunity bestowed by the heavens. I didn't think that the 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty would lose to Uzun and Mengshi Zhao. On a moonlit night, north of the Yin Mountains, a massive white ivory tent towered over the vast grassland. Around the tent were massive snow-white wolves, their fangs savage as they warily observed their surroundings. Inside the huge moon-white tent, under the illumination of the oil fire, a pitch-black figure was cast on the wall of the tent, looking incomparably huge. Although this figure had not used a single technique, this pitch-black figure exuded a terrifying aura that was like a bottomless abyss, drawing in all the moonlight in a radius of several hundred zhang. Pass on my order. The army is to head south and confront the Tang dynasty's biting protectorate. Once the Tang dynasty's biting protectorate makes any strange moves, we'll head south and utterly crush them. The rough voice clenched his fists as he spoke without hesitation. But Great Khan, wouldn't we be completely offending the Tang Emperor this way? In the flickering light of the flames, another voice cautiously spoke, sounding extremely apprehensive. Ha, do you still think that the Tang dynasty is the same as the Tang dynasty of the past? 180,000 elites. This was 180,000 elites. If this was the Tang dynasty of the past, even if Mengshi Zhao and Uzun mobilized all their forces, they still might not be able to defeat them. The rough voice spoke, his voice faintly drifting, as if he was lost in some sort of memory. The strength of the Tang dynasty was not something a normal person could imagine. When the war god of the Tang dynasty, Soyung's son, reigned, the eastern and western Turks were at their strongest, and Osmish Khagan was just a child. 150,000 fully armed Black Wolf Khaganate of the Western Turks could not stop Soyung's son's 8,000 cavalry. Later on, the Eastern and Western Turks suffered heavy losses, and Wang Jiuling and Wang Zhongxi took a very long time to recuperate. The 6 to 700,000 Tang dynasty soldiers had been able to suppress all the foreign empires around them by relying on their overwhelming strength and various weapons and equipment. But now, 180,000 Tang dynasty elites and 60,000 reinforcements had been routed by Mengshi Zhao and Uzun. To the Western Turks and the other empires, this was something that they would never have dared to imagine. The Tang dynasty has already become weak, no longer as strong as it once was. They have grown weak, and we are no longer the same. The rough voice suddenly became resounding, and all the white wolves around the tent seemed to sense something. They bared their teeth, savage looks in their eyes. Go! The Turks and the Tang dynasty must fight, not now, but in the future. Yes, your subordinate understands. At the same time, to the east of Yuzhou, to the north of the Bohai Sea, across a vast plain and a clear river, a towering wall towered over the Anong Protectorate headquarters. The wall was covered in smoke and appeared to have gone through countless battles, but it was still extremely tall and sturdy. Not even the cities of the Central Plains could compare to it. Gamo City. On the surface of the gigantic city, there were 3 Chinese characters written in the language of the Central Plains. The Goguryeo Empire bordered the Central Plains, and although they spoke different languages, the official language used was the standard Chinese characters of the Central Plains. Boom! All of a sudden, the closed gates of Gamo City burst open, and groups of Goguryeo infantrymen swarmed out. At almost the same time, large numbers of Goguryeo soldiers also surged out from the gates to the north and south of the city. This sudden movement alarmed all of Yuzhou. All the Tang dynasty soldiers of the Anong Protectorate were dumbfounded by this sudden development. To the east of Yuzhou, the Anong Protectorate possessed a ruling status. This status had not been crowned by one's own will, but forged through blood and fire, through several battles. In the northeast, the Goguryeo Empire had always adopted a passive defense, relying on its sturdy walls and various fortifications to resist the attacks of the Tang dynasty. Never before had the Tang dynasty taken the initiative to open the gates to attack. Enemy attack. On the banks of the Lushui River, several Tang dynasty scouts suddenly leaped onto their horses and galloped off with shrill cries. None of them noticed that on the walls of Gamo City, a stalwart Goguryeo general with 5 long sabers on his back was silently watching him with a complicated expression. In his hands was a bright yellow Goguryeo imperial edict, and the image of the moon in the water on the imperial edict clearly indicated its owner. This was a decree from Emperor Yun Gaesaman of the Goguryeo Empire. Attack with vigor and restrain the Tang dynasty. On the bright yellow imperial edict, there were only these few words. In a single night, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, the Goguryeo Empire, and even the distant Arabian Empire began to show signs of activity around the Tang dynasty. The entire Tang dynasty was in a state of panic. Chapter 483. Everything has returned to the starting point. As the sky howled, Wang Chong stood on the summit of Deflecting Blade Mountain, his mind extremely calm. The southwest had been defeated, the reinforcements had been cut off, and the surrounding foreign countries were beginning to stir. Everything was exactly the same as it had been all those years ago. While the entire Tang dynasty was shaking and panicking, only Wang Chong remained calm, as if he had long ago predicted all this. Young master, the training is complete. What should we do next? A familiar voice came from behind him as Zhao Jingdian galloped over on his warhorse. Almost at the same time he galloped over, hundreds and thousands of cavalrymen rushed down from the top of the mountain. A powerful aura burst out from their bodies as if they were crushing dry weeds and rotten wood. Wang Chong's gaze followed these galloping figures until they vanished into the distance. If one didn't know better, they would find it very difficult to believe that these powerful cavalry were actually the true martial realm experts that Wang Chong had recruited from the various clans. These people all belonged to different clans, had different cultivations, and had different temperaments, but at this moment, they were already beginning to form an army. Only with Li Sai's formidable martial prowess and Zhao Jingdian's ability to lead and organize troops had he been able to create such an army in such a short time. Although he was still far from reaching his former heights, Zhao Jingdian had already begun to show the talent for command that Wang Chong had once relied on as his left and right arms. It's about time. Should we begin the second phase of training? Wang Chong took out the prepared blueprints from his sleeve and gave them to Zhao Jingdian. These true martial realm experts raised by the great clans were still far from reaching the level of strict discipline, strict obedience, and flexible change that he desired. However, as long as they mastered the two formations that he had given them, it would be enough. The rest could only be trained on the march, and Zhao Jingdian might not be able to complete this follow-up training. Wang Chong would have to personally train them. Yes, young master. Zhao Jingdian didn't think much of it. Lowering his head, he quickly turned and left. Dee-da-da. Zhao Jingdian's horse galloped forward, quickly catching up to the 1,000-man army. Orders came from the front, and as Zhao Jingdian's orders rang out, the 1,000-man army formed by the clan experts once more began to transform, sending clouds of dust into the air. I didn't expect that you were really training them. Suddenly, a sigh came from behind him. The voice was mixed with emotions, and there was an indescribable feeling to it. Wang Chong's entire body quivered. He abruptly turned his head and saw a familiar figure with broad shoulders, dressed in a yellow dragon robe. His every movement exuded an air of nobility as he slowly walked up the hill behind him. Behind him, the old steward's ghost-like figure followed closely behind him without making a sound. Young master, I'm sorry. It was His Highness the King of Song who repeatedly told me not to inform him. Not far away, Wei Anfang lowered his head, his arms hanging limply, his face full of shame. Wang Chong slightly creased his brow in surprise, but he quickly regained his composure. His Highness the King of Song and the old butler were already so close, but he had not noticed them at all. This truly shouldn't have been the case. But when he thought of the old butler's unfathomable cultivation and the King of Song's own strength, Wang Chong understood. Although he was now much stronger than before, he was still far from being able to compare to true experts like the King of Song and the old butler. It was normal for him not to have noticed them. His Highness the King of Song has come for Uzun and Mengshi Zhao. Wang Chong turned his head and indifferently asked. He had apparently expected that the King of Song and the old butler would appear here. You already predicted that this would happen, right? The King of Song's expression was solemn as he got straight to the point. His expression was far less relaxed than Wang Chong's. The matter of Uzun, Mengshi Zhao, and Wang Chong had troubled him for a very long time. Based entirely on his intuition, the King of Song felt that Wang Chong might know something. This was why he had appeared here. On the border of Longxi, Uitadra Konglo and Dusong Mengpoj appeared at the same time, leading an army to attack Big Dipper City and restrain Geshu Han. You already knew about this, right? The King of Song said. Military affairs were no small matter, but he was using them to interrogate a teenager in the wilderness. This was madness, but the King of Song was completely convinced of this. There were some things that, if he did not get to the bottom of, he would never be able to rest easy. The northeast, northwest, and Baiting were all restless, intentionally or otherwise restraining the armies of the Tang dynasty. This was an unprecedented situation. Although the people of the imperial court had yet to notice, the King of Song already sensed an unprecedented danger. Not too long ago, these foreign countries had all been filled with reverence and fear, avoiding the armies of the Tang dynasty as quickly as they could. When had they dared to act so recklessly? This abnormal phenomenon made the King of Song feel a deep sense of danger. If these foreign countries no longer respected the Tang dynasty and could even come to a tacit agreement to restrain the Tang dynasty, how could the Tang dynasty suppress these foreign countries and occupy the central region? The Tang dynasty had spent several decades, perhaps even a century, conquering these foreign countries to achieve the current prosperity and peace of the Tang dynasty. If all this fell apart and they lost their reverence, then wouldn't the Central Plains once again fall into the situation of being attacked from all directions by these foreign countries? Momentary gains and losses could be argued over and over again, but if the tacit agreement of peace was broken, then what awaited the Tang dynasty would be a perilous round of wars. The current Tang dynasty was far from being as powerful as it had been. The long period of peace had disintegrated the hearts of the people, but the foreign countries that could only be crushed under the feet of the Tang dynasty's iron crossbows and cavalry had benefited from the peace of the Tang dynasty. Through long-term trade, they had obtained large amounts of refined iron, pig iron, cast iron, and steel to forge a large number of weapons. They had become much stronger than they had been in the past. The king of Song couldn't help but worry. The war in the southwest was probably just the beginning. What awaited the Tang dynasty was an endless storm. Without the skin, how could the hair attach itself to it? Once that happened, no one would be able to survive. Yes. In the face of the king of Song's doubt, Wang Chong did not hesitate and very openly admitted it. Warning! Warning! The stone of destiny's voice rang out in his mind, but Wang Chong acted as if he hadn't heard it. His gaze was fixed on the king of Song across from him. At this moment, the king of Song was stunned. Although the king of Song had had a strong intuition during the court session, when Wang Chong admitted it, the king of Song still found it unexpected. The king of Song looked at Wang Chong in astonishment, his mind a mess, unable to describe what he was feeling. South of the rosy clouds, the land of Jiang'e, and the border of Longxi, not a single civil and military official of the court could have predicted these changes in these places, including himself. If someone had said that they had long since predicted all this, the king of Song would have thought that they were crazy. Chapter 484. Just how did you know? The king of Song said after a long silence. Wang Chong had far too many secrets. Although he had experienced many ups and downs and political storms, and had developed a pair of sharp eyes and political senses, sometimes, even he could not see through this teenager in front of him. This isn't a very big secret. Wang Chong shook his head and nonchalantly said. Although he was a reincarnator and possessed the memories of his entire life, there were many things that he could deduce without the need for foresight. Mengshi Zhao, Uzun, Goguryeo, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, the Abbasid Caliphate, these empires had been getting stronger and stronger over the last few years, while the Tang dynasty had been stagnant. Not only had they been stagnant, but they had been constantly retreating. The imperial court was filled with arrogance and laziness, and it just so happened that the Central Plains was so rich and populous that these foreign kingdoms were bound to develop wild ambitions. And of all these foreign kingdoms, the Uzun and the Tang dynasty had the fiercest conflicts, and they were also the most aggressive. Unlike the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, the Uzun Empire was located far away on the plateau. The Tang dynasty had the will but lacked the strength to conquer this empire. Thus, in every war, the Uzun only needed to retreat far into the interior and escape. They always had a safe fortress, and they were able to recover much faster than other foreign kingdoms. At the same time, if the Uzun wanted to expand, the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains was its greatest obstacle. All of this meant that the Uzun Empire would always be the first to strike. And Jelifeng and his 300,000 Mengshi Zhao soldiers were that opportunity. They had already successfully routed Xianyu Zhongtong in the southwest, and if they wanted to further their gains, they needed to defend against the reinforcements of the other armies of the Tang dynasty. Thus, they had to send an army to restrain Geshu Han and his Big Dipper army in Longxi. Therefore, Wang Chong was not surprised by all of this. Although Uzun was a country outside of civilization and was far from being as prosperous as the Central Plains, there were a few extremely powerful beings hidden behind them. Whether it was Daluan Ruozun, Huishu Wuzong, Huitadra Konglo, or Dusong Mengpoj, they were all top-class generals of the world, not one bit inferior to the famed generals of the Central Plains. With these famous generals working together, there was no strategic gap that could be exploited. Even if Wang Chong knew about it, it would be useless. If you can analyze this, why didn't you say it earlier? The king of Song looked at the young man in front of him with mixed feelings. If it was in the past, he would have been amazed by Wang Cheng's words. But at this time, the southwest had been defeated, Longxi was in danger, and the various foreign countries of the northeast, northwest, and Baiting were beginning to stir. The king of Song was in no mood to think about these things. If I say it, will anyone believe me? Wang Cheng indifferently said. The war in the southwest had already reached this stage. After 300 years, this vast and prosperous empire was finally facing its first life-or-death crisis on the scale of an earthquake. The following crises would only get more dangerous and more formidable than the last. If they couldn't get through this, the domino effect that followed would only cause the empire to collapse completely. At this time, there was no longer any need to hide anything. Ah! After hearing Wang Cheng's words, the king of Song raised his head to the overcast sky and gave a long sigh, no longer able to speak. Wang Cheng had spoken correctly. The affairs of the state were no trifling matter. Even if Wang Cheng had personally told him how all this would happen, even if he had a relationship with several generations of the Wang clan, he would never have rashly believed him. This was not a matter of whether or not he trusted Wang Cheng. Rather, this was how important matters of the imperial court had always been resolved. It could not be mixed with any emotion. Without conclusive evidence, just based on a few deductions from a single person, deciding the military arrangements of a country, deciding the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, was not the correct way to handle political affairs. Thus, no matter what Wang Cheng said, until all this truly happened, no one would believe him, including the king of Song himself. It was precisely because he understood this that the king of Song couldn't help but deeply sigh, an intense feeling of helplessness welling up in his heart. Li Zhengyi had been defeated, and the Tang dynasty no longer had any soldiers to spare. Is there really no way to avoid all this? At this moment, the king of Song's mind was in turmoil, his mind in turmoil. Your Highness, what has happened cannot be avoided. The urgent task at hand is to resolve the war in the southwest. Wang Cheng sternly said. No matter how bad the situation was, as long as the dust had not settled, he would not easily give up. What else can be done? The southwest has already been lost. Your 1,000 soldiers are like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. They can't resolve anything. The king of Song bitterly smiled as he gazed at the roiling dust on a distant mountain. Everything was clear. He had understood as soon as he arrived. Wang Cheng had sold the spirit vein so that he could gather the experts of the great clans and point his sword toward the southwest. Only the perilous situation in the southwest was worth Wang Cheng gathering so many experts and paying such a heavy price. But all this was destined to be like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. 1,000 soldiers, even if they were the experts of the great clans of the capital, what could they do? A war could not be resolved by a trifling 1,000 experts. Wars were far from simple. If I don't try, how can I know if I'll succeed? Wang Cheng countered, his expression suffused with determination. With the war in the southwest at this stage, there was no other way. Although 1,000 experts from the great clans was not a lot, it was all he could do at this moment, and it was his utmost effort. How do you need me to help you? The king of Song sternly said. Your Highness, if all goes as expected, in 7 days at most, I will leave this place. I don't have a single title of nobility on me, and I won't be able to intimidate the generals there. Thus, I need your Highness's token to carry out my orders. In addition, if possible, your Highness should send me more experts. Wang Cheng said. The king of Song nodded. After handing the token to Wang Cheng, he dejectedly left with his old butler. As Wang Cheng watched the king of Song leave, a ripple of emotion in his eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. Every minute that passed in the southwest was a minute more dangerous. He didn't have much time left. He had to make full use of every second. Cree! Screech! A warhorse's hooves thundered through the forest, and a moment later, a dragon-like steed shot out of the forest like a bolt of lightning. After several months, the white-hoofed shadow had become even more robust and powerful. Whether it was its bones, ligaments, or muscles, the white-hoofed shadow had reached the robust state of adulthood and could not be mentioned in the same breath as before. Hiya! Wang Chong mounted the horse, grabbed the reins, and squeezed the horse's belly. Man and horse became one, and like a wisp of smoke, they galloped toward the Zhang clan's smelting yard. Cling cling clang. In the western part of the capital stood a massive smelting yard. Before Wang Chong had even gotten close, he could already hear clanging and see thick plumes of smoke rising into the air. Young master. Upon seeing Wang Chong, a person in charge of the Zhang clan hurriedly came up to greet him. There was no one in the Zhang clan who didn't recognize Wang Chong. Take me in to take a look. Wang Chong dismounted from the white-hoofed shadow and got straight to the point. The Zhang clan's smelting yard was bustling with activity. Thick plumes of smoke and clanging could be heard without end. As he walked in, Wang Chong could feel waves of heat rolling toward him. Young master, according to your orders, all the master craftsmen of the clan have been mobilized to work day and night to forge the Wuzi steel sword for you. The clan has placed great importance on this matter, and the patriarch is personally presiding over it. He just left. If you had come a little earlier, you would have run into him. The person in charge of the Zhang clan introduced. It had been a long time since the Zhang clan's smelting yard had been so lively. All the master craftsmen had been mobilized, and in just a few short days, they had been busier than they had been in the last few months. Wang Chong nodded. The matter of the Wuzi steel sword was no small matter. With a glance, Wang Chong could see that many experts were standing guard here, including the experts of the Wang clan. The Wuzi steel was no small matter. As long as they could obtain it, many people would be willing to take the risk. Wang Chong, why are you here? Just as they were speaking, a gust of wind blew over. Zhang Tsong, Zhang Jian, and a few elders of the Zhang clan hurried over. How's the forging of the Wuzi steel sword going? Wang Chong nodded in greeting. It'll be done in 3 days. However, you'll have to rely on yourself for the rest. Zhang Tsong looked at Wang Chong worriedly. 1,000 Wuzi steel swords required many steps. Even for a prestigious clan like the Zhang clan, it was rather taxing, let alone Wang Chong. Zhang Tsong was a little worried that Wang Chong wouldn't be able to complete it alone. I understand. All you need to do is to complete the first steps of forging 1,000 Wuzi steel swords. You don't have to worry about the rest. Wang Chong said calmly. The most crucial technology of the Wuzi steel was in his hands. No one could fake it. However, even though the steps were complicated, the last few steps of forging the Wuzi steel swords were much simpler. As long as enough quenching fluid was prepared, the quenching of the Wuzi steel swords would be relatively fast. In fact, it was much easier than the Zhang clan. In addition, the matter of the armor has been handed over to the other clans. We've already sent someone to supervise the process. Compared to the Wuzi steel swords, I'm afraid the armor will be forged much faster. Zhang Jian added from the side. There were too many steps to forge the Wuzi steel swords, and it was rather troublesome to forge them. However, the armor made from the meteoric metal was much simpler. Wang Chong didn't forge pure meteoric metal armor. Instead, he added the meteoric metal to other high-grade refined metals. This greatly reduced the difficulty of forging and increased the number of armors that could be forged. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.